Chapter 2784. What are you laughing at? I'm not scaring you, but one of you will soon be killed by Lord Night Sorrow. Facing the two of them, Dragon Sparrow King, who had no ability to resist, truly felt that he was in a hopeless situation. However, he naturally could not admit defeat verbally. He wanted to scare the Fire Bat King and the Fire Wyrm King. The Fire Bat King and the Fire Wyrm King, who had been focused on Dragon Sparrow King, did not pay attention to Night Sorrow. However, in this situation, they were clearly not prepared to let Dragon Sparrow King go. The two of them discussed via voice transmission and attacked at the same time, preparing to kill Dragon Sparrow King. This. Lord Night Sorrow. Help. Seeing that the Fire Bat King and the Fire Wyrm King had both used their destructive attacks, Dragon Sparrow King could not hold on any longer. Don't panic. I didn't appear on purpose. I placed you in a conspicuous place. At this time, Night Sorrow's voice suddenly sounded in Dragon Sparrow King's heart. Lord Night Sorrow. What attack are you preparing? When Dragon Sparrow King heard Night Sorrow's voice, it was as if he had grabbed onto a life-saving straw. His ugly expression became much more normal. Seeing Dragon Sparrow King's expression, the Fire Bat King and the Fire Wyrm King looked at each other, but they did not stop attacking. Night Sorrow, who was hiding in the void, said to Dragon Sparrow King, "You don't have to be afraid. When they are about to attack you, I will summon you into the spatial artifact. What I want to do now is to put the Fire Phoenix King into the spatial artifact. First, I can control the flow of time and slow down her nirvana by 100 times. The second is to undergo nirvana in a spatial artifact. No matter how strong she is still a threat." Good idea. Why didn't I think of it? Hearing Night Sorrow's words, Dragon Sparrow King's heart trembled. He had indeed not thought of this. Actually, I just thought of it. It's a brainwave. Come in. At this time, Night Sorrow had sneaked into the surroundings of the Fire Phoenix King, who was unconscious, and directly put her into the clear sky pagoda. Then, he quickly put Dragon Sparrow King inside. There is 100 times acceleration and deceleration here. Hurry up and recover. Let's fight side by side. Good. All right. The Dragon Sparrow King, who had responded, was in high spirits as he hurriedly nodded in agreement. Soon after, he swallowed medicinal pills in the vast heaven pagoda to recover. However, the blood essence he had consumed was the power of his bloodline. It was slightly difficult for him to recover it, so his progress was relatively slow. And Night Sorrow naturally exposed his aura when he took the Fire Phoenix King and Dragon Sparrow King into the vast heaven pagoda. Although there were still concealing runes on his body, the Fire Bat King and the Fire Wyrm King had already discovered it. Realizing that Night Sorrow had put the Fire Phoenix King into his spatial artifact, the Fire Bat King and the Fire Wyrm King both went crazy. As the Fire Bat King flapped his wings, he threatened, "Hurry up and release the Fire Phoenix King, or the two of us will tear you apart. Do you think you have the strength to say such words?" Facing the Fire Bat King's Night Sorrow, he showed no signs of fear. "You are courting death. Fire Wyrm King, you and I will kill him immediately." The Fire Bat King was so angry that his head was about to explode when the Fire Phoenix King was taken into his spatial artifact. After sending a voice transmission to the Fire Wyrm King, he transformed into a fire bat and launched a soul attack on Night Sorrow. This attack of the Fire Bat King, who had transformed into a fire bat, was a unique skill. It was extremely harmful to the soul. Even Night Sorrow found it difficult to resist, and his soul was immediately damaged. However, what he used to receive this attack was the soul in his second divine sea. Although it was damaged, for the time being, as long as he didn't get hit again, it wouldn't be a big problem. Night Sorrow had already seen through the previous move when he opened the Sea Serpent's Eye, but there was no way to dodge it. However, if the Fire Bat King used it again, he would definitely be able to dodge it. He was hit by this king's soul extermination kill. Fire Wyrm King, attack. When the Fire Bat King's attack succeeded, he saw that the Fire Wyrm King did not attack and immediately reminded him loudly. I feel that there's something fishy about this. I'm afraid that he'll absorb the attack into his spatial artifact. That might cause devastating damage to the Fire Phoenix King. The Fire Wyrm King sent a voice transmission with a solemn expression. This was the reason why he didn't attack immediately. What time is it now? Do you still have time to think about such things? What we need to do is give him a lot of pressure. In the face of life and death, how can he have time to think about things in his spatial artifact? The Fire Bat King was a little worried about the Fire Wyrm King's worries, but he felt that the two of them couldn't be tied down. All right. Let's attack together. The Fire Wyrm King, who was originally a little worried, thought that was the case. After replying, he took out a golden dark steel pitchfork and floated it above his head. At the same time, he transformed into a Fire Wyrm. When the Fire Bat King launched another soul attack on Night Sorrow, he spat out flames and used his blood to activate the pitchfork above his head, smashing it towards Night Sorrow. A soul attack is not enough. At this moment, Night Sorrow directly used the green rock soul-rending roar to shatter the Fire Bat King's soul attack. He used the profound heaven-roaming dragon steps to disappear into the void, dodging the Fire Bat King's flame attack. Then, he used the Samsara halberd to launch a forbidden spear attack, sending the Fire Wyrm King's dark steel pitchfork flying. C didn't hesitate at all in this continuous response. You have some strength. Even if you don't have a ruler artifact, you're not a divine lord. You're about as strong as a mid-level divine king. After seeing Night Sorrow's performance, the Fire Bat King made a judgment in his heart. Although Night Sorrow's cultivation was a mid-level divine lord, his strength was about the same as a mid-level divine king's. In his opinion, this was inconceivable. However, the Fire Phoenix King was undergoing nirvana in Night Sorrow's spatial artifact. The Fire Bat King couldn't remain calm at all. After his attack didn't succeed, he immediately sent a voice transmission to the Fire Wyrm King. I can feel that we're deep in his formation. We can't use our strongest attack, so we'll just ignite our bloodline. All right. I have the same idea. In this formation, I can only unleash the strength of a mid-level divine king at most. This feeling is very stifling. As the Fire Wyrm King replied to the Fire Bat King, he immediately used a secret technique to ignite his bloodline, instantly increasing his strength by several times. Try to kill him as quickly as possible. If this kind of consumption continues for too long, we won't be able to afford it. The Fire Bat King, who had also ignited his bloodline, said to the Fire Wyrm King before launching another attack on Night Sorrow. This time, he took out his divine artifact from his spatial artifact. It was a somewhat strangely shaped wooden fish. This dark brown wooden fish had a very large mouth. After it was taken out, it immediately emitted a faint chanting of Buddhist scriptures. However, these Buddhist scriptures were clearly somewhat evil. They were all evil curses. There's actually such an evil divine artifact. When the Fire Bat King took out the wooden fish divine artifact, Night Sorrow immediately felt that his soul had been greatly affected. Chapter 2785. Lord Night Sorrow, this divine artifact of the Fire Bat King is very strange, but I happen to have a divine artifact that can crack it. Dragon Sparrow King, who was in the Clear Sky Pagoda, noticed that Night Sorrow was a little passive. He immediately took out the black jar that he had used against the Fire Phoenix King from his spatial artifact and handed it to Night Sorrow. Find an opportunity and smash the black jar at the Fire Bat King's divine artifact. It can temporarily seal it. Okay. I'll try. After Night Sorrow obtained Dragon Sparrow King's black jar divine artifact, he immediately used a divine talisman refined by Dragon Sparrow King and used the dragon steps to speed up. He closed the distance between him and the Fire Bat King and smashed the black jar divine artifact at the other party's wooden fish. When the black jar approached the wooden fish, it immediately poured out foul black gas and black water, directly enveloping the wooden fish. The wooden fish that was enveloped immediately quieted down and no longer made any sound. When Night Sorrow saw this, he was immediately overjoyed and said, "Dragon Sparrow King, this divine artifact of yours is really not simple. It's really useful." The wooden fish stopped its special ability to corrode the soul, and Night Sorrow felt his entire body relax. He found an opportunity to activate the Tianyun bow and shoot the heavenly cloud 5-element arrow at the wooden fish. He was prepared to use the divine artifact to directly destroy the wooden fish. Bastard! Dragon Sparrow King's broken jar is really a hindrance. Seeing Night Sorrow use the black jar to destroy the wooden fish and shoot the 5-element arrow, the Fire Bat King cursed and put the wooden fish back into his spatial artifact. He wasn't sure if the wooden fish could withstand the attack of a sovereign divine artifact. At this moment, the Fire Bat King completely understood that Night Sorrow's true strength was at the Divine King's level. A Divine King using a sovereign divine artifact's attack power could be imagined. Unconsciously, he was a little afraid. However, after Night Sorrow's attacked the wooden fish, it quickly changed direction and flew toward the Fire Wyrm King at an extremely fast speed. It bombarded the Fire Wyrm King's steel fork. There was a loud rumble. The 5 sky cloud arrows all exploded, but the Fire Wyrm King's pitchfork was also completely destroyed. This was considered a suicidal attack. The Fire Wyrm King, who hadn't reacted in time, roared furiously. "What are you shouting for? I still have a backup plan waiting for you." After the Fire Wyrm King's steel fork was shattered, Night Sorrow immediately used the dragon steps to approach the Fire Wyrm King. He raised the Tianyun bow and slapped it at him. "Fire Bat King, help me." When the Fire Wyrm King saw that Night Sorrow was using his Dominator divine weapon as a close combat weapon, he was at a loss for what to do. He hurriedly shouted for the Fire Bat King to help. "I know. How could he just watch with folded arms? You can't take a sovereign artifact head-on. Be careful. I'll attack him with all my might." At the same time, the Fire Bat King turned into a human and attacked Night Sorrow. The Fire Bat's body was too big, and it was not agile enough. It was not suitable for close combat. The 2 divine kings who have ignited their bloodlines are indeed not easy to deal with. Night Sorrow, who had been using the Tianyun bow to suppress the Fire Wyrm King, immediately felt a huge pressure when the Fire Bat King approached. Almost every time he threatened the Fire Wyrm King, the Fire Bat King's threat also arrived. The combination of the Fire Bat King and the Fire Wyrm King made him very uncomfortable. To be honest, it was difficult to win 1 against 2. After all, Night Sorrow had already used most of his abilities. At this moment, he asked, "Dragon Sparrow King, how is your recovery?" Although the Dragon Sparrow King's true combat strength was weaker than the Fire Bat King and the Fire Wyrm King, it was very important that he could temporarily hold one of them back. The Dragon Sparrow King, who was in the Clear Heaven Pagoda, heard Night Sorrow's voice transmission and immediately replied apologetically, "I still need a while. But the good news is that the Fire Phoenix King beside me doesn't seem to have a smooth rebirth. And her energy seems to be leaking." "Is that so?" Night Sorrow, who originally did not have the energy to pay attention to the Fire Phoenix King, heard the Dragon Sparrow King's words and immediately used his injured second divine soul to check. He discovered that there was indeed a problem with the Fire Phoenix King's rebirth. The flame energy around her was constantly spreading into the Clear Heaven Pagoda. It seemed that everything was not going smoothly. "I have an idea." Although the Dragon Sparrow King had not recovered well, Night Sorrow, who discovered that the Fire Phoenix King's energy was leaking, immediately thought of a way. He immediately absorbed the energy that the Fire Phoenix King was leaking. Continuously absorbing the energy, Night Sorrow felt as if his strength had instantly increased by a small realm. If not for the fact that his body was strong enough, absorbing the flame energy in such a tyrannical manner would very likely cause his body to collapse. The feeling of absorbing external energy is really uncomfortable. However, the feeling of having one's strength increase is indeed not bad. Night Sorrow, who was originally struggling to fight against the Fire Bat King and the Fire Wyrm King, had temporarily increased his cultivation to the level of a high divine lord. At this time, he no longer chose to fight in close combat. Instead, he distanced himself from the Fire Bat King and the Fire Wyrm King. Then, he took out the remaining 4 heavenly cloud arrows and transformed the Samsara heavenly halberd into the shape of an arrow. He aimed at the void and shot the heavenly cloud 5 elements arrow. Who is this shot at? The Fire Bat King and the Fire Wyrm King were clearly somewhat stunned the moment Night Sorrow shot the 5 elements arrow. Because Night Sorrow did not aim at the 2 of them at all, they did not feel like they were locked on. This was very strange. Not good. This attack is accompanied by a divine soul attack. Fire Wyrm King, be careful. Very soon, the Fire Bat King, who was very proficient in divine soul attacks, reacted and reminded the Fire Wyrm King to be careful. However, the divine soul attack of the 5 elements arrow was completely traceless. How could the Fire Wyrm King have the ability to resist? His divine sea was directly shattered. You guys have lost. Night Sorrow, who had increased his strength, stimulated Tian Yun Bao's special energy and directly shattered the Fire Wyrm King's divine sea. Then, he controlled the 5 elements arrow and shot it in the direction of the Fire Wyrm King. At the same time, he used the Black Sky Dragon roaming steps and attacked the Fire Wyrm King. Fire Wyrm King, quick, enter this king's spatial artifact. At this moment, the Fire Bat King was clearly a little flustered. He immediately used his spatial artifact and wanted to put the Fire Wyrm King inside. However, the Fire Wyrm King's divine sea was already shattered. How could it respond to his ability? There was no reaction at all. The Samsara heavenly halberd directly pierced through his dantian. Fire Bat King, you're the only one left. After defeating the Fire Wyrm King, Night Sorrow looked at the Fire Bat King. He knew that the Fire Bat King had no intention of retreating. At the same time, the Fire Wyrm King's body rapidly lost its luster and directly disappeared into the void. Clearly, he no longer had the ability to revive. This king is the only one left. He's enough to deal with you. The Fire Bat King roared and released a terrifying sound wave attack at Night Sorrow. This was another of his secret techniques. However, to Night Sorrow, whose strength had increased, this kind of attack no longer posed much of a threat. At the same time that he easily blocked it, the Dragon Sparrow King in the Clear Sky Pagoda said, Lord Night Sorrow, I've almost recovered. Next, it's our turn to fight 2 against 1. All right. Come out and fight with me. Although he had absorbed the Fire Phoenix King's energy, Night Sorrow's consumption was still very great. He immediately summoned the Dragon Sparrow King. After the Dragon Sparrow King was summoned, the Fire Bat King, who was fighting to the death, was quickly destroyed. Chapter 2786. After being sucked into the tunnel, after tumbling for a while without any concept of time, Night Sorrow was teleported to another giant stone formation. This giant stone formation was almost exactly the same as the one outside, but the surrounding environment was clearly different. Night Sorrow used his divine soul power to investigate and discovered that this was a pitch-black world. There was not a trace of light. Above the sky, there was no sun or moon at all. There were only occasional birds that blotted out the sky and covered the sun. If not for opening the sea serpent eye, he would not be able to see anything clearly at all. He was not used to it at all. Dragon Sparrow King, is the trial ground that you entered also like this? After investigating for a while, within 1,000,000 miles, other than some feather god and high god level birds and beasts, there were no other races. Night Sorrow asked doubtfully. No. The trial ground that I entered was not dark. Is the sun setting right now? The Dragon Sparrow King in the vast heaven pagoda said with a frown. The trial ground that he entered was much brighter than here, and it was accompanied by light from beginning to end. Whether it's dark or not isn't the key. The main thing is that it's different from the trial ground that you entered. Perhaps all the rules will be different. Continuing to use his divine soul power to investigate the surrounding night's sorrow, just as he was about to open his mouth and discuss with the Dragon Sparrow King what to do next, he suddenly felt a majestic energy rise up from the vast heaven pagoda. It was actually the Fire Phoenix King, who had been reborn at this juncture. You actually persevered? Night Sorrow, who had absorbed nearly half of the Fire Phoenix King's energy, immediately transmitted. Thanks to you, although this king succeeded in nirvana, his strength did not rise but fell instead. After the Fire Phoenix King in the vast heaven pagoda realized where he was, he frowned and said, "Now that this king has fallen into your hands, how are you going to resolve the grudge between us? You are in my spatial artifact, your life and death are already in my control. Do you admit this or not?" Night Sorrow did not immediately say what he meant, but instead asked the Fire Phoenix King a question. Humph. Hearing this, the Fire Phoenix King snorted coldly and said angrily, "If you want to kill me, then say it. I, the Fire Phoenix King, have fallen into your hands today. There is nothing I don't dare to admit. What I need you to do is very simple. That is to use your knowledge and experience to help me succeed. Once I leave this place, I will release you." Night Sorrow thought for a moment and said. To him, the Fire Phoenix King and he only had different standpoints. There was no deep hatred between them. When Fire Phoenix King heard Night Sorrow say this, she didn't believe him and asked, "That's it? Are you serious?" "Of course I'm serious. I don't need anything else from you. You can think about it, and then tell me if you're willing to help," Night Sorrow said firmly. He felt that the only thing in front of him was to pass the trial successfully. Everything else was not important. What's there to consider? If you can swear an oath to the heavens, I, the Fire Phoenix King, will do my best to help you succeed, Fire Phoenix King said without hesitation. Originally, she thought that Night Sorrow would definitely make things difficult for her, but she did not expect that the matter would be so easy to resolve. At this time, the Dragon Sparrow King in the vast heaven pagoda sneered and said, "How can the person chosen by Lord Phoenix be someone who goes back on his word? Until now, you still haven't thought it through. Your defeat is not unjust." Dragon Sparrow King's words made Fire Phoenix King immediately fall silent. She indeed did not think of this. At this time, when Dragon Sparrow King said it, it made her think of many things in an instant. She thought to herself, how can the person chosen by Lord Phoenix be someone I can defeat? Following that, she was silent for a while. Then, she opened her mouth and said, "I promise you. I will help you with all my strength, but when I leave the small world, you have to let me go free." Good. Look at the surrounding environment. When you were trying to pass the trial, did you experience it? Night Sorrow opened his mouth and let Fire Phoenix King observe the pitch-black surroundings. Although she was unable to release the power of Divine Soul, the silent darkness was clear at a glance. After observing for a while, Fire Phoenix King thought for a while and said, "I think I've seen it before." Seen it before? Think about it again. When Dragon Sparrow King heard Fire Phoenix King's words, he immediately became interested. Night Sorrow also said expectantly, "Think about it carefully and see if you can remember anything." He knew that Fire Phoenix King had just been reborn. Her memories of the past would be a little blurry and she would need time to adapt. All right. I'll try my best to think about it. Right now, I can only remember a vague shadow. Fire Phoenix King, who had transformed into her human form, frowned as she thought about her past experience. After thinking for about 6 hours, her expression suddenly changed and she said, "I remember now. But it's definitely bad news." Bad news? Night Sorrow immediately asked in puzzlement. Yes. Bad news. Fire Phoenix King replied and continued, "I remember that when we were trying to pass the trial, someone once mentioned that the world of darkness was the habitat of the extraterrestrial creatures. Therefore, we are most likely in the territory of the extraterrestrial creatures." How strong are the extraterrestrial creatures? After Fire Phoenix King spoke, Night Sorrow immediately set up a concealment array around his body. If what she said was true, then it would be very dangerous. This was equivalent to killing his way to the back of the enemy alone. When I was trying to pass the trial, there were 5 divine king among the enemy forces and only 2 on the side of the divine realm. Therefore, I failed. Mentioning her failure, Fire Phoenix King added, "That's right. Everyone has more than one chance to pass the trial. However, every time you fail, the difficulty of the next trial will increase by 10 times. You must cherish the first opportunity in front of you. Don't worry. I want to pass the trial more than anyone else." Night Sorrow replied and continued, "Tell me everything you know." All right. At that time, my process of passing the trial was not smooth, but I came into contact with the creatures of the world of darkness. They can hide in the darkness and attack without anyone noticing. In the darkness, their combat strength is 3 times stronger than in the light. Therefore, every time they attack the cultivator area of the divine realm, it is carried out in the night. Recalling some of the experiences of passing the trial, Fire Phoenix King did not hold back. At this time, she also hoped that Night Sorrow would be able to pass the trial successfully. After all, both sides could be considered to have common interests. Through Fire Phoenix King's narration, Night Sorrow understood a lot. At this time, he asked Dragon Sparrow King, "What happened when you passed the trial? Were the enemies different?" Completely different. What I encountered were the enemies of the blood world. They are a group of bloodthirsty evil creatures. They can change their form at will, just like blood water. It is very difficult to kill them. Thinking of his battle experience, Dragon Sparrow King said with lingering fear. Chapter 2787. Although he had successfully been reborn, the terrifying experience of death made him feel incomparably terrified every time he recalled it. He did not want to experience it again. It seems that everyone's experience is different. But it's not simple. After Dragon Sparrow King recounted his experience from beginning to end, Night Sorrow thought for a moment and said, "I have a rough understanding of it." "That's enough." Fire Phoenix King said, "We are now in the dark world, so we must be extra careful. This is very likely the territory of the dark creatures. The situation you are facing now is much more difficult than the 2 of us. Just be careful." After Night Sorrow replied, he left the concealment array, chose a direction, and walked forward. Moving forward in the endless darkness, even Night Sorrow felt a strong sense of danger. He clearly knew that he had to succeed this time. There was no room for failure. As for the feather god and upper body realm birds and beasts in the void, Night Sorrow carefully observed them and found that they were originally creatures of the heavenly realm, but they had lost their intelligence and were all drifting aimlessly. This should have been the territory of the heavenly realm, but it was swallowed by the dark world. All the creatures of the heavenly realm have become like this. Fire Phoenix King said with emotion. Seeing thousands of creatures of the heavenly realm become like this, she could not bear it. And this cruel scene became even more cruel as Night Sorrow continued to go deeper. Not long after, they saw a creature of the dark world devouring the wandering creatures of the heavenly realm. This creature of the dark world had the cultivation of a high-level divine lord. Its entire body was pitch black and merged with the night. Night Sorrow used the sea serpent's eye, which had adapted to a lot, to observe it and saw that the mountain-sized creature was swallowing everything. The unconscious creatures of the heavenly realm were swallowed into its mouth like shrimps and chewed non-stop. Bastard. Using creatures of the heavenly realm as food. Damn it. After seeing what was happening, Night Sorrow immediately took out the Samsara heavenly halberd and attacked the giant dark creature in front of him. A living cultivator of the heavenly realm? The dark creature that discovered Night Sorrow was stunned at first, then it laughed loudly and said, "A cultivator from the divine world actually dares to enter the territory of darkness? You're courting death. Let me, Eternal Darkness King, send you on your way." In the process of replying, Eternal Darkness King suddenly turned into the night and disappeared above the void. As a result, Night Sorrow's attack had no effect at all. Good move. The sea serpent dragons, I should have suffered greatly in such an environment. Night Sorrow couldn't help but praise him for not being able to determine his opponent's whereabouts at the first moment. At the same time, he unleashed the Azure Rock's soul-rending roar and attacked the surrounding space in a domineering manner. A single roar is so powerful. This is the strength of the Divine King. After Night Sorrow's roar, it directly dealt a heavy blow to Eternal Darkness King, who had blended into the night. After discovering that Night Sorrow had the strength of the Divine King, he immediately used his means to report this matter. Oh no! Lord Night Sorrow, our whereabouts have been exposed, and it's very likely that we'll be greeted by the enemy's magnificent army. The two of us can't go out, so you can only rely on yourself. What should we do? After discovering that Eternal Darkness King had been severely injured by Night Sorrow, he immediately reported. Dragon Sparrow King, who was in the Clear Sky Pagoda, immediately had a solemn expression. What else can we do? We'll deal with whatever comes our way. I'm not afraid of the number of enemies. I only hope that the Divine King has fewer enemies. While Eternal Darkness King was reporting, Night Sorrow once again roared out the third move of the Azure Rock soul-rending roar, triple roar shattering cycle. Eternal Peace King, who only cared about reporting, was immediately killed and turned into dust, disappearing into the void. It seems that this kind of dark creature is afraid of large-scale attacks, especially spiritual attacks. As for the attacks brought by divine artifacts, they're not very useful because their figures are very difficult to capture. Dragon Sparrow King said when he saw that Night Sorrow had succeeded. It's like this. Once, when I fought with the Dark Divine King, the situation was similar. However, at that time, they were fighting in the territory of the Divine Realm, so their special abilities were not too terrifying. Now, it seems that their methods of merging into the void in their own territory are much more brilliant. We must pay more attention. Fire Phoenix King also said with some worry. The main problem now is that we have no sense of direction. We don't know which direction to go. Night Sorrow's situation was somewhat different from the two of them. He was not afraid of ordinary dark creatures. After all, he had the power of merit in his body. This is indeed a problem. If there are too many dark creatures, even if your strength is tyrannical, you will soon be unable to hold on due to excessive consumption. Fire Phoenix King said with a frown. She felt that the matter was not simple. At present, the best choice is to hide and wait for the battle. Night Sorrow replied. Originally, he wanted to set up a concealment array in the void, but he realized that the materials were all in the spatial artifact. Thus, he gave up on this idea and found a towering mountain peak. At the hillside, he dug a cave and temporarily hid. He knew that it would not be long before the dark creatures descended. If possible, Night Sorrow was prepared to use the dark creatures to increase his power of merit. The power of merit that he had just obtained from killing Eternal Darkness King was greater than the consumption. However, after waiting for 2 months, there were still no dark creatures descending. Fire Phoenix King, what do you think of Lord Night Sorrow? Dragon Sparrow King, who was in the Clear Heaven Pagoda, was somewhat bored and sent a voice transmission to Fire Phoenix King. In this illusion, he was somewhat anxious. Hearing this question, Fire Phoenix King asked, "What do you mean?" "What I mean is, what do you think Lord Night Sorrow will do in order to succeed?" Dragon Sparrow King continued. "I can't see clearly." Fire Phoenix King spoke out her thoughts. At this time, Dragon Sparrow King laughed and said, "It's not an exaggeration to say that I feel that his future achievements should not be lower than Lord Ancestor Phoenix. Therefore, I have the heart to follow him. I advise you to hurry up and hug his thigh before he grows up." "I don't believe it. Lord Ancestor Phoenix has already transcended the divine realm and is not something that anyone can catch up to." Fire Phoenix King looked at Night Sorrow and said, "He is the same. Let's wait and see. It won't be long before he completely rises." Dragon Sparrow King looked at Night Sorrow with eyes full of trust and expectation. Fire Phoenix King could not understand this gaze. She shook her head and continued to observe the situation outside. It was still pitch black outside and the cave was even darker. Nothing could be seen clearly. Fire Phoenix King simply went to teach Cow Linger how to cultivate. Just like this, another half a year passed and the dark creatures still did not appear. Night Sorrow felt that he could not wait any longer, so he went out of the cave and headed straight in the direction of the entrance. Chapter 2788. This was a dark creature of equal strength to Eternal Darkness King. After discovering him, Night Sorrow immediately used the virtuous dragon lock formation on him. Having already fought with Eternal Darkness King, he already had a certain understanding of dark creatures and didn't want to probe further. After the virtuous dragon lock formation was used, the dark creature was immediately bound inside. He was only at the monarch god level and had no ability to break free. Being locked in a sealed space, he immediately panicked. He merged into the void of the sealed space, but after trying, he realized that there was no way to leave. Don't try to escape. Tell me everything you know. Night Sorrow, who had bound the dark creature, immediately shouted. Cultivator of the heavenly realm. Why are you in our territory? Hearing Night Sorrow's voice, the dark creature immediately determined his identity and was instantly terrified. This was because this was the depths of the dark territory. Since its birth, no cultivator of the heavenly realm had appeared. Don't be curious as to why I'm in the dark territory. Hand over the map of the dark territory and tell me everything you know. As Night Sorrow threatened, he also used some of his power of merit. Being burned by the golden power of virtue, the dark creature in the sealed space immediately let out a cry. The power of virtue's damage to dark creatures was more exaggerated than Night Sorrow had imagined. We don't have a map here. At the same time, the bound dark creature replied, also, you won't get any information from me, the King of Eternal Darkness. You're still a very righteous dark creature. In that case, I won't make things difficult for you. Go to hell. After hearing King of Eternal Darkness's words, Night Sorrow pondered for a moment and directly used the green rock soul-splitting roar on the virtuous dragon lock formation. After being shaken by the green rock soul-splitting roar, the dark creature's body almost completely collapsed. It was difficult for it to regroup. You, King of Eternal Darkness, didn't expect that Night Sorrow would directly kill him with just a question. You what? If you don't speak, go to hell. You are not the only dark creature in the dark territory. Night Sorrow, on the other hand, had no intention of showing any mercy as he struck again. Facing the taboo spear, King of Evernight had no ability to resist because his divine soul had been severely injured. Seeing that he was about to be blasted into pieces, he immediately begged for mercy. Lord of the God Realm, I beg you to let me go. I will definitely tell you everything I know. Then what are you waiting for? Hurry up and tell me. Night Sorrow said resolutely. He believed that even the dark creatures could sense his attitude. Yes. I'll talk. Evernight King. Although the name sounded domineering, he was, in fact, doomed. Even Eternal Darkness King was no match for him. He said, this is the center of the Dark Territory. The Dark Territory is located between the Crimson Territory and the Heavenly Diabolism Territory. If you want to go to the gathering place of the Celestial Realm cultivators, just go straight ahead. Right now, there's a huge war going on over there. Flourishing Age is huge, so it's easy to find them. The Dark Territory is between the Bloody Territory and the Heavenly Diabolism Territory? You mean that there's not only the Dark Territory in this world? There are other creatures that attack the Celestial Realm? Night Sorrow immediately asked. At this time, Dragon Sparrow King in the Clear Sky Pagoda said, Lord Night Sorrow, the Crimson Territory is the enemy I encountered when I was breaking through. I remember. Night Sorrow replied and waited for Evernight King to say something. However, Evernight King did not speak. Night Sorrow immediately scolded, what are you hesitating for? So you don't even know about the 7 territories surrounding the Celestial Realm. The celestial realm is at the center, surrounded by the 7 territories. Evernight King said and then asked, "You don't even know about these things. Are you not from the celestial realm? This has nothing to do with you. I promise to let you go, you can go now." Night Sorrow said and did not ask Evernight King anymore and directly let him go. "Lord Night Sorrow, why didn't you ask anything and let him go? This way, he will leak information. You should have killed him directly." Dragon Sparrow King immediately said anxiously when he saw Night Sorrow let Evernight King go. "What I meant just now was that if he said something useful, I would let him go. It's not my style to go back on my words." After letting Evernight King go, Night Sorrow directly rushed towards the celestial realm according to the direction he said. With a direction, he no longer ran around like a headless fly. As for whether Evernight King would report it or not, he did not care at all. According to Night Sorrow's judgment, the 7 territories were currently besieging the celestial realm. Some of the stronger divine kings should have already joined the battle. All right. Lord Night Sorrow has his own principles, this is a merit. Dragon Sparrow King said worriedly, "It's just that. Currently, the 7 territories are fighting against the celestial realm. The other party's divine king is at least 20 years old. Among the cultivators of the celestial realm that the 2 of us came into contact with, including the hidden background, there are no more than 3 divine kings. How are we going to fight against this? If the celestial realm was destroyed, it would obviously be a failure." Dragon Sparrow King was a little anxious. Night Sorrow shook his head and said, "You have to understand Lord Ancestor Phoenix's mentality. Since this is a test, he will only set the difficulty of the challenge higher, and it is not impossible to pass. If we rush over immediately, we will definitely make it in time. As for how to turn the tables, we will adapt to it when the time comes." That makes sense. How wise is Lord Ancestor Phoenix? How could he leave behind a trap that cannot be solved? Fire Phoenix King in the Clear Sky Pagoda agreed with Night Sorrow's words. She, who was holding Cao Ling's hand, nodded and said, "If you understand it this way, it should be the case." After understanding the cause and effect, Dragon Sparrow King immediately calmed down. At this moment, Fire Phoenix King suddenly slapped her forehead and said, "Right. I just remembered something. Something very important." "What is it? Tell me." Night Sorrow immediately said. "In the past, I heard from the cultivators of the celestial realm that each of the 7 territories has its own origin. In other words, the source of energy. As long as the origin of the darkness territory is destroyed, the strength of the creatures in the darkness territory will decrease by a lot. They will drop by at least 2 small realms." Fire Phoenix King said excitedly, "For example, an upper-level divine king will be reduced to a lower-level divine king. If it is a lower-level divine king, he will be reduced to a middle-level divine lord. Instead of going to the celestial realm to help, we might as well take advantage of the empty rear of the darkness territory to destroy the darkness origin. Are you sure about this matter?" Hearing Fire Phoenix King say this, Night Sorrow immediately asked. If this matter was true, then he would not hesitate to search for the darkness origin. "Of course I'm sure. This king won't joke about this kind of thing." Fire Phoenix King had not used this king's name for a long time, but at this moment, she said coldly, "Good. This information is very valuable. I'll go destroy the darkness origin." After receiving Fire Phoenix King's confirmation, Night Sorrow immediately changed his direction and searched for the darkness creatures in the darkness territory. Chapter 2789. After searching for about an hour in the dark territory, he finally encountered a god monarch level dark creature. When he got closer, Night Sorrow realized that the dark creature he encountered was actually Eternal Night King again. He immediately felt that the other party was a little unlucky. At this moment, the King of Eternal Darkness was wandering in the void. After encountering Night Sorrow again, Eternal Night King immediately sent a voice transmission in horror. "Didn't you say you would let me go? You can't go back on your words. That's already the last time. Now, I want to ask you something again. Night Sorrow didn't attack. He opened his mouth to reply and continued, "Tell me, where is the origin of the Dark Territory?" The origin of the Dark Territory? You want to destroy it. I can't tell you this. Upon hearing the two words, Eternal Night King immediately became alert and repeatedly rejected Night Sorrow. Hurry up and say it. I know you're not a strong-willed existence. Night Sorrow released his divine domain and surrounded Eternal Night King, giving him great pressure. I just want to live a little more comfortably. Why are you, a divine realm cultivator, so overbearing? Eternal Night King felt Night Sorrow's divine domain suppressing him and was a little flustered. He started to complain. It sounded like he was very humane. Fire Phoenix King in the Clear Sky Pagoda hurriedly reminded, these dark creatures are extremely sinister and cunning. Don't be fooled by his current appearance. There are no good people among the dark creatures at all. Don't worry. I know. Night Sorrow, who was cultivating the power of virtue, replied confidently. He could feel that the current Eternal Night King wasn't as evil as Eternal Darkness King, but he was definitely not a good person either. He continued, if you want to live a comfortable life, you can't pay the price of the Divine Realm cultivators' deaths. Don't forget that the land you're in belongs to the God Realm. There were still many creatures of the divine world wandering aimlessly in the sky. Yishang glanced at them and said, I've never been an evil person. However, in order to prevent the other creatures of the divine world from becoming like this, I must force you to speak today. I won't say. No matter what, I will not reveal the location of the darkness origin. The Eternal Darkness King's attitude didn't change because of Yishang's words as he replied coldly. Unconsciously, it emitted a strong evil aura. This was the eruption of its nature. If you don't want to say it, fine. Night Sorrow heard Evernight King's voice transmission and said, this is a realm war. If you don't cooperate with me, there's only one outcome, complete destruction. Even if you don't say it, someone will. As he spoke, Night Sorrow used the Azure Rock soul-rending roar, preparing to directly kill Eternal Night King. Then he would look for other creatures of darkness. Now that it was a realm war, he wasn't going to show mercy. It's not that easy to kill my people of darkness. At this moment, the aura on Eternal Night King's body changed completely. From Divine Lord strength, it directly rose to the level of a middle-level Divine King. After his strength increased, he successfully blocked the Azure Rock soul-rending roar. Although I can't sense the other party's aura, I feel that Eternal Night King used a summoning technique to let the king of the creatures of darkness possess him. Fire Phoenix King in the Clear Sky Pagoda expressed her judgment and said, I heard about it when I was challenging the trial. This kind of summoning technique can't be done in an instant. He must have used this summoning technique after we separated for the first time. I know. Those who aren't of my race must have different intentions. Night Sorrow replied and then said, it's better to summon a king, he should know better. Cultivator of the God world, you want to find out the location of the darkness origin? Stop dreaming. With this king here, you won't be able to cause any trouble in my territory of darkness. The king-level dark creature was summoned by Eternal Night King. With a roar, it attacked Night Sorrow. The way it attacked was similar to Eternal Night King. It directly dissipated its body in the void and completely merged with the darkness. This time, Night Sorrow didn't continue to use the Azure Rock soul-rending roar. Instead, he took out the Samsara halberd and shot out fiery demons subduing flames into the void. The entire sky was set ablaze with flames. It seemed that because the flames contained the aura of the ancestral phoenix, its power was especially great in the darkness. It directly burned the king-level dark creature out of the darkness. It's actually the aura of an invincible. The king-level dark creature, Dark Feather King, who was burned out of the void, was very afraid of the ancestral phoenix's aura. He, who had a huge body, immediately transformed into his human form. Although it was in the darkness, one could see that his appearance was similar to Night Sorrow's. He was imitating Night Sorrow's transformation. After transforming into Night Sorrow's appearance, it was much easier for Dark Feather King to avoid the flames. He was no longer troubled by the flames that contained the aura of the ancestral phoenix. However, after being burned by the flames, there was already a trace of the ancestral phoenix's aura on his body. Night Sorrow could sense this aura and determine his location. At this moment, Night Sorrow took out the Samsara halberd and shot the forbidden spear at Dark Feather King. This time, Dark Feather King didn't disappear into the night. Instead, he transformed into a divine weapon that looked like the Samsara halberd and fought head-on with Night Sorrow. Because he judged that he didn't have the ability to remove the aura of the ancestral phoenix, he chose to make a prompt decision. A divine weapon that he casually transformed is actually so powerful? Night Sorrow, who was fighting with Dark Feather King, realized that the Samsara halberd didn't destroy the divine weapon that the other party had transformed into. This meant that the divine weapon that the other party had casually transformed was at the level of a half-step sovereign. This was very strange. There are many methods that you don't understand. This king will definitely kill you today. Dark Feather King used the divine weapon in his hand to catch the forbidden spear. He shouted arrogantly and attacked Night Sorrow. The divine weapon that looked like the Samsara halberd immediately shot out an endless amount of dark energy. This kind of strength had surpassed the level of the divine king. It was vaguely at the level of a half-step sovereign. How can he be so strong? Facing Dark Feather King's attack, Night Sorrow used his movement technique to dodge, but he was chased by the dark energy. The dark energy that Dark Feather King shot out seemed to have a mind of its own as it chased after Night Sorrow non-stop. At this moment, Fire Phoenix King, who saw that Night Sorrow was in a passive position, reminded him, Night Sorrow. I remember now. Your current opponent is very likely the Dark Territory's king. The reason why he can erupt with such strength is because he can use the Dark Origin energy. The divine weapon in his hand is constructed from the Dark Origin energy. I see. I was wondering how a mid-level divine king could have such terrifying strength. In the process of escaping, Night Sorrow controlled the power of virtue to constantly purify the surrounding dark energy to relieve the pressure on his body. Chapter 2790. Power of Virtue. You are the divine Lord of Virtue. You are the person chosen by the unrivaled warrior. Dark Feather King exclaimed when he saw Night Sorrow using the power of virtue to purify the origin of darkness. At the same time, he, who was standing quietly in the void, began to summon his real body. He did not dare to be careless when dealing with Night Sorrow, who had the power of virtue. While Dark Feather King was summoning his main body, Night Sorrow used the power of virtue to purify the surrounding dark energy. However, he could not stop Dark Feather King from summoning his main body. When Night Sorrow had completely purified the surrounding origin of darkness, Dark Feather King's main body had also successfully descended. After his main body descended, his aura immediately became much stronger. Although he was still at the level of the middle-level Divine King, his body seemed to be 3 to 4 times stronger. As for Eternal Night King, he had used his blood sacrifice to summon his main body. The person chosen by the unrivaled warrior. Let this king see your true strength. Dark Feather King's aura and divine domain had become much stronger. His every movement had a trace of majesty. As he spoke, he threw the dark Samsara halberd, which was formed by the power of origin, towards Night Sorrow. This attack seemed simple, but it contained a strong destructive aura and a taboo taste. Very strong. But I still want to meet force with force. Facing Dark Feather King's attack, Night Sorrow could clearly feel the power of this attack. However, he did not retreat. After activating the Treastrimsa battle's secret technique and increasing his strength, he merged the divine souls of the 2 deity seas and raised his strength to the peak. He then used the dark Samsara halberd to attack with the forbidden reincarnation spear. In terms of pure power, this spear technique was not as strong as the forbidden reincarnation spear. However, it contained the thunder attribute. After it was used, it naturally suppressed the dark energy. After the dark Samsara halberd and the dark Samsara halberd collided, there was a loud explosion. Night Sorrow, who was at a disadvantage in terms of strength, retreated 100 miles before stopping. Although he was at a disadvantage in this attack, he was very satisfied. He used the Dark Samsara halberd to attack with the forbidden reincarnation spear again. This attack and the previous attack were both forbidden reincarnation spear. However, the power was obviously different. Night Sorrow's comprehension had increased as he had merged the two deity C's halberd. He instantly discovered some flaws in this spear technique. Does the person chosen by the unrivaled warrior only have this method? Dark Feather King, calm Dark Feather King mocked. He Dark Feather King once again. With Dark Feather King. This strike was even stronger than the previous one. In his opinion, it would at least be able to heavily injure Yishan. According to Night Sorrow's judgment, after upgrading the taboo reincarnation spear, there would be no problem resisting Dark Feather King's attacks. Battle Feather. The outcome this time was completely different from the previous time. Feather King. His protective divine domain had also been completely shattered, and he had sustained serious injuries. Dark Feather King was very surprised. He thought, why is the same move so much weaker when there is no change in divine origin force? You don't understand? There are many things that you don't understand. Night Sorrow's deity C's halberd had merged the two deity C's halberd. His deity C's halberd had more than doubled. The most important thing was that his comprehension ability, which was already at the peak, had increased even further. Combined with the eye of the sea serpent, he could see through Dark Feather King's attack. He upgraded the forbidden reincarnation spear and attacked again. Dark Feather King was furious when he saw Night Sorrow attack the forbidden reincarnation spear for the third time. This time, he used his strongest attack to fight against Night Sorrow. However, he was still at a disadvantage. He was seriously injured. No. He is getting stronger and stronger. This king needs to think of a way to deal with him. After Dark Feather King was at a disadvantage again, he reflected. He felt that this was not the way to go. Therefore, he did not choose to fight head-on. Instead, he hid in the void. Using the darkness origin force, he used the darkness territory's strongest attack. Void Destruction Technique. When the Void Destruction Technique was used, Dark Feather King's figure reappeared in front of Night Sorrow. However, there were dozens of Dark Feather Kings. Why are they all real bodies? Night Sorrow, who used the sea serpent's eye to observe, realized that the 33 Dark Feather Kings in the void were all real bodies. In the divine realm, only talented people could cultivate one or two doppelgangers. Now, Dark Feather King actually had 32 doppelgangers. This was simply incomprehensible. Why? It's your turn to be incomprehensible. Dark Feather King, who knew that Night Sorrow was very confused, sneered and used all his doppelgangers to attack. His real body held the Dark Samsara halberd and waited for the opportunity to attack Night Sorrow. There's no other way. I still have to use Tianyun Bao. Facing more than 30 doppelgangers of Dark Feather King, Night Sorrow had no choice but to take down the Tianyun Bao on his back. He continuously pulled the bowstring and shot at the numerous Dark Feather King figures in the void. Tianyun Bao was already severely damaged. Logically speaking, it should be repaired before using it. However, facing so many Dark Feather King's doppelgangers, he really had no other choice. Dominator Grade Divine Artifact. Dark Feather King was shocked when he saw Night Sorrow take out the Tianyun Bao and shoot at his doppelgangers. Although Night Sorrow had been carrying Tianyun Bao on his back, Tianyun Bao had concealed his aura and was not detected by Dark Feather King. Now that he discovered Tianyun Bao, while Dark Feather King was shocked, he also became excited and had the thought of taking it for himself. After all, he had the help of the Darkness Origin Force and was much stronger than the ordinary Divine King. A Dominator-grade Divine Artifact is indeed useful. However, shooting it out of nowhere doesn't seem to have much effect on his doppelgangers. Night Sorrow, who had been pulling the Tianyun Bao non-stop, saw that the effect was not very good. He immediately turned his power of virtue into arrows and shot them out. This way, the effect was immediate. 6 or 7 of Dark Feather King's doppelgangers were destroyed. Good move. A Dominator-grade divine artifact and power of virtue is indeed this king's nemesis. Unfortunately, your strength is still too weak. Dark Feather King, who had his doppelgangers destroyed by Night Sorrow, said coldly. Then, he combined his doppelgangers into 5. Including the main body, there were a total of 6 doppelgangers in the void. After combining, these doppelgangers became much stronger. Under the pursuit of the arrow of virtue, they were able to handle it with ease. Seeing that Night Sorrow's arrow of virtue was no longer effective, Dark Feather King said murderously, "Since the Dominator-grade divine artifact can't help you, you should prepare to die." Prepare to die? Are you talking about yourself? Chapter 2791. Shameless Boasting. Dark Feather King did not believe Night Sorrow's words at all. He replied coldly and combined his doppelgangers again. He turned into a real body and led 3 doppelgangers to attack Night Sorrow. Dark Feather King's 3 doppelgangers and his real body had the same strength. They attacked Night Sorrow from above, below, left, and right. You have overestimated yourself and underestimated the Dominator divine weapon. Dark Feather King and his 3 doppelgangers were equivalent to 4 middle-level divine kings attacking at the same time. If it was a normal Sir God, he would not be able to withstand it. However, Night Sorrow was very calm. He immediately injected his blood into the Tianyun bow and activated it. Then, he turned the Samsara halberd into an arrow and shot it at Dark Feather King's real body with the power of merit. After shooting the arrow, Night Sorrow turned the power of merit into 5 arrows and shot the 5 elements merit arrow at one of the doppelgangers. At the same time, he used the merit dragon lock spell on one of the doppelgangers and trapped it temporarily. Night Sorrow used the green rock soul-splitting roar on the last doppelganger and pounced on Dark Feather King's real body. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. It was so fast that Dark Feather King found it unbelievable. Night Sorrow, who had temporarily merged the 2 doppelgangers, did not think much of it. Boom! When Night Sorrow pounced on Dark Feather King's real body, Dark Feather King's real body and the Samsara halberd were in a state of wrestling. When the 5 elements merit arrow was shot at one of the doppelgangers, it destroyed half of the doppelgangers and temporarily lost the ability to fight. At this moment, the doppelgangers that were trapped by the merit dragon lock spell broke free and continued to attack Night Sorrow. The dark Samsara halberd that was originally in the real body's hands was now in the doppelganger's hands. The doppelgangers that were attacked by the green rock soul-splitting roar were first shattered and then quickly reformed and continued to attack Night Sorrow. No! There's danger. Night Sorrow was originally attacking Dark Feather King's real body. However, he quickly realized that something was wrong. He used the eye of the sea serpent dragon to discover that Dark Feather King's real body had swapped with one of the doppelgangers. The one that was holding the dark Samsara halberd had become the real body. The one that was fighting the Samsara halberd had become a doppelganger. Death slash. Just as Night Sorrow realized that something was wrong, Dark Feather King suddenly swung his dark Samsara halberd and launched a terrifying attack at Night Sorrow. When this attack erupted, all the energy within the darkness seemed to have been sucked out. The surrounding world Dark Feather King's SS world. Not to mention ordinary people, the vast majority of cultivators were also in a state where they couldn't even see their fingers in front of them. The world turned pitch black. Even Yishang's sea serpent dragon's eyes were blurry to a certain extent. At this time, Dark Feather King roared confidently, "Appearing in the dark territory is your biggest mistake. Here, this king is invincible. In my opinion, you're not that invincible." Dark Feather King's attack came from nowhere, but Night Sorrow did not panic. He once again injected his blood into Tianyun Bao. He completely activated it. Tianyun Bao, who had been activated once again, immediately shone brightly, illuminating the surrounding world. Once the darkness disappeared, Dark Feather King's aura immediately weakened. In spite of this, his attack also slashed towards Yishan. The attack that could be hidden in the darkness could not be hidden at all after Tianyun Bao fully activated it. Night Sorrow easily used his movement technique to dodge it. However, just as he dodged Dark Feather King's attack, one of his doppelgangers had already charged over. Come. Let's see who's afraid. Facing Dark Feather King's doppelgangers, Night Sorrow did not retreat at all. He chose to fight it head-on. He and the doppelgangers were sent flying at the same time. However, Dark Feather King's doppelgangers were heavily injured, but Night Sorrow was not injured. This was because Night Sorrow had just used the Dominator artifact Tianyun Bao as a close combat divine artifact. After being smashed by Tianyun Bao, Dark Feather King's doppelgangers were similar to the one that was hit by the 5 elemental arrow. They instantly lost their ability to fight. Although Dark Feather King's doppelgangers' attacks were comparable to the real body, their bodies were obviously not as tough as the real body. They obviously could not withstand Tianyun Bao's attack. Virtuous 5 elemental arrow. After crippling Dark Feather King's doppelgangers once again, Night Sorrow did not feel complacent or stop. He immediately formed 5 virtuous arrows and aimed at the other doppelgangers. He then shot out the virtuous 5 elemental arrow. Under the illumination of Tianyun Bao's light, Dark Feather King and his doppelganger's strength decreased by varying degrees. Facing Night Sorrow's 5 elemental arrow, the doppelgangers that were locked in a stalemate with the heavenly Samsara halberd had no ability to resist. They were immediately destroyed. Dark Feather King's real body could only watch the arrows and sigh. I did not expect you, Asur God, to have so many tricks up your sleeves. Dark Feather King was furious that 2 of his doppelgangers were crippled and one of his doppelgangers was destroyed. Originally, in his opinion, this was a battle that he would win no matter how it developed. When the real battle begins, it depends on strength and tricks. Who cares if the opponent is a divine king or Asur God? Night Sorrow, who replied to Dark Feather King, did not stop his attacks. He formed another virtuous arrow and shot the 5 elemental arrow at Dark Feather King's real body. Although your tricks are strong, this king has already seen through them. Dark Feather King was not nervous at all when facing the 5 elemental arrow. He waved the Dark Samsara halberd to block it. Night Sorrow had already shot the same virtuous 5 elemental arrow twice. Regardless of whether it was the trajectory or the energy it contained, Dark Feather King had seen through it. Therefore, he did not feel much pressure when facing it. He used the Dark Samsara halberd to neutralize it. After neutralizing the virtuous 5 elemental arrow, Dark Feather King was in high spirits. After all, with the Divine King's strength, neutralizing the attack of a Dominator divine weapon was something to be proud of. You can't defeat this king even after using a Dominator divine weapon. Prepare to receive this king's strongest attack. Fuse, Darkness Origin. After neutralizing the 5 elemental arrow, Dark Feather King roared. Behind him, a huge sphere appeared. This black sphere was emitting extremely evil darkness energy. Night Sorrow immediately determined that this was the Darkness Territory's origin. It contained extremely powerful darkness energy. After the Darkness Origin appeared, Dark Feather King immediately transformed into his real body and started to fuse with the Darkness Origin. I must not let him succeed in the fusion. Otherwise, he would be able to kill you with just a wave of his hand. The Dominator divine weapon will also become his. Fire Phoenix King immediately warned when she saw Dark Feather King fusing with the Darkness Origin. She, who had gone through the trial, had some understanding of the fusion of origins. She knew that with Dark Feather King's strength, after fusing with the Darkness Origin, his strength would increase by leaps and bounds. The middle-ranked Divine King's Dark Feather King could even unleash a half-step Dominator attack. Chapter 2792. Don't worry. I will think of a way to solve this problem and not let him merge successfully. Even if Fire Phoenix King did not say it, Night Sorrow knew what it meant for Dark Feather King to merge with the Darkness Origin. But in reality, even if he was at his peak, he did not have the confidence to solve the crisis in front of him. Fire Phoenix King reminded him again, the strength of the darkness origin that he has merged with has exceeded our knowledge. If he dares to merge with the darkness origin in front of you, it means that even if you use Tianyun Bao to attack him, it might not have any effect. It's best to use a divine soul attack. If your divine soul attack is strong enough, it can interfere with him. Yes. If you use a divine soul attack, it might have an unexpected effect. Dragon Sparrow King, who had not spoken for a long time, also said. He also felt that a divine soul attack was the best way to solve the crisis in front of them. That's a way. Night Sorrow received the two's reminder and suddenly had some ideas. After thinking for a while, he roared the green rock soul-splitting roar at Dark Feather King, who had merged with the darkness origin. But it did not have any effect. He also used the Samsara halberd to attack the divine soul, but it did not have any effect either. Dark Feather King, who had fused with darkness origin, was still suspended in the void in a demonic manner. The darkness origin's power in the void, which was illuminated by Tianyun Bao, continued to flow into his body. With the influx of the energy, Dark Feather King's aura became stronger and stronger. If continuing to attack does not have any effect, the only way is to run away. Fire Phoenix King saw that Night Sorrow's attack did not have any effect and immediately became worried. They were now bound together for good or ill. If something happened to Night Sorrow, she would not have a good ending either. No. According to what they said, the realm of the gods must be in a dangerous situation. I have to destroy the darkness origin in front of me. Night Sorrow said as he unwillingly consumed a few pills. After recovering his divine origin force, he activated the 33 Heavens battle secret technique and used the merit power to form 5 merit arrows. He shot the merit arrows at Dark Feather King, who had merged with the darkness origin. But it still did not have any effect. As time passed, Dark Feather King, who had transformed into his original form, turned back into a man. He floated in the void, his long hair, and the darkness origin's power. The darkness origin's power even make Tianyun Bao's power. Dragon Sparrow King reminded Dark Feather King, Lord's Night Sorrow, you can set up a formation. No matter how strong he is, Dark Feather Kings, no matter how strong he is tests to you. The formation you speak of relies on the terrain and the power of the starlight. It's dark here, and I can't borrow the power of starlight. King Long K, your reminder is very timely. After replying to the Dragon Sparrow King, Yi Shang immediately thought about what kind of formation he could set up here. Night Sorrow did not hesitate and set it up. Then, he thought for a while and set up a formation that could absorb energy. He started to absorb the darkness origin's power. Although the absorption speed was much slower than Dark Feather King's, it could still absorb some of the darkness origin's power. Night Sorrow was prepared to detonate the formation after it absorbed a large amount of energy. This would deal a fatal blow to Dark Feather King. Dark Feather King was absorbing the darkness origin's power and posed a great threat. However, his biggest weakness was that he could not move. Although his defense was amazing and even Tianyun Bao's 5 elemental arrow could not pose a threat, Night Sorrow could use it as he wished. What kind of formation is this? Can it be stacked and set up a few more? Dragon Sparrow King, who was in the Clear Heaven Pagoda, saw Night Sorrow set up a formation that could absorb the darkness origin's power and immediately asked. Of course not. If I could, would have set up 10 or 20 of them. Night Sorrow replied speechlessly to Dragon Sparrow King's question. Hearing Night Sorrow's words, Dragon Sparrow King did not speak. Fire Phoenix King spoke first. This won't do. It won't affect him much. If this goes on, he will still succeed. We will all die. In this kind of environment, the formation I can set up is only this much. Night Sorrow replied helplessly. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind and he said, I seem to have thought of a way. He thought of the method to absorb the darkness origin energy and control the souls of the dark creatures in the endless bone realm. Without any hesitation, he immediately absorbed the darkness origin's darkness origin. Night Sorrow, what are you doing? We cultivators of the divine realm will suffer a backlash if we absorb this kind of darkness origin energy. We will completely become slaves of the darkness. Seeing that Night Sorrow was actually absorbing the darkness origin energy, Fire Phoenix King, who had some understanding of this kind of energy, immediately advised. She felt that Night Sorrow's response was not a good idea. Don't worry. I know what I'm doing. This is the best way. After replying, Night Sorrow continued to absorb the darkness origin energy. After absorbing almost all of it, he immediately used the fused souls to control Dark Feather King, who had fused with the darkness origin energy. Although the darkness origin energy gave Dark Feather King an extremely strong defense, it could not stop Night Sorrow from using mind control on him. You can actually use this kind of method. He did not expect Night Sorrow, a virtuous divine lord, to be able to use such a dark method. Dark Feather King, who did not care about Night Sorrow's attack, immediately realized that something was wrong and used his soul to resist. His originally tightly shut eyes abruptly opened, revealing a pair of black hole-like eyes. It looked extremely evil. The moment he opened his eyes, two black beams of light shot towards Night Sorrow's body. Your attack is useless. Night Sorrow, who was competing with Dark Feather King, knew that Dark Feather King's attack contained the darkness origin energy. However, he did not take it to heart. As he was attacked by the darkness origin energy, Tian Yunbao released a shocking amount of energy at the crucial moment and blocked the attack. Your mind control attack is also useless against this king. After confirming that the darkness origin energy did not pose a threat to Night Sorrow's body, Dark Feather King replied confidently. In his opinion, although Night Sorrow was talented, he was still a divine lord. His soul was not as strong as his. Chapter 2793. Not only was Night Sorrow's divine soul powerful, but it was also ridiculously powerful. Relatively speaking, it was even more terrifying than his strength. After resisting for a while, Dark Feather King thoroughly realized that things were not good. Although he was absorbing the darkness source power non-stop and his strength kept increasing, his divine soul strength did not increase by much. Facing the divine soul strength of Night Sorrow, he gradually showed signs of being unable to resist. At this time, he already did not dare to divide his divine soul to absorb the darkness source power anymore and focused on resisting Night Sorrow. Night Sorrow indeed has a way, worthy of being the challenger designated by Lord Ancestor Phoenix. Seeing that Night Sorrow actually forced Dark Feather King to stop absorbing the darkness source power in the vast heaven pagoda, he was immediately roused. Regarding this, Dragon Sparrow King smiled without finding it strange and said, I said before, his means are astonishing. Anything he does is not surprising. If I were you, after today, I'd directly seek refuge with him. In the future, his accomplishments are limitless. If we follow behind him, we might have the chance to break through to Sovereign Realm. Compared to Fire Phoenix King, Dragon Sparrow King had more contact with Night Sorrow and trusted him more. For now, I'll believe what you said. But I, Fire Phoenix King, don't want to submit to others. Although he felt that what Dragon Sparrow King said made sense, when it really needed to be humiliated, Fire Phoenix King still chose to refuse. People all said that dragons and phoenixes had aspirations. Fire Phoenix King, as the phoenix race, had his own pride. Don't want to submit to others, then forget it. Regarding Fire Phoenix King's choice, Dragon Sparrow King actually understood, but he did not appreciate it. In his view, a wise man submits to circumstances. During the process of the two people's brief conversation, Night Sorrow and Dark Feather King's divine soul confrontation already progressed to a white-hot stage. Dark Feather King, who was originally incomparably confident in his own divine soul, somewhat panicked after discovering that Night Sorrow's divine soul was stronger than his. Under the situation where he was virtually completely suppressed, he started to beg the darkness source for help. Dark Feather King was willing to be controlled by the darkness source will and was not willing to be controlled by Night Sorrow's mind. At the end of the battle, Dark Feather King's soul had already been destroyed, and his control was completely taken over by the Dark Origin. This was an incomparably evil will. After it took over Dark Feather King's soul, it immediately fought against Night Sorrow and took the initiative. Little Divine Lord Realm Cultivator, all that awaits you is complete destruction. The power of the origin source is not something you can resist. While fighting against Night Sorrow, the Darkness Origin will was also constantly interfering. You reminded me. I also have the power of the origin. The Darkness Origin will's words reminded Night Sorrow of the rewards bestowed by the God World's origin. Although the origin energy of the God Realm was not particularly powerful, the origin energy that it contained was extremely pure. After using the God World's origin energy, Night Sorrow was immediately strengthened. The will of the Darkness Origin, which he had originally felt impossible to resist, was now gradually becoming something that he could barely resist. This was due to the fact that Night Sorrow's divine soul was a fusion of two separate divine seas. It was even more powerful than the average Divine King. After all, even the middle-level Divine King, Dark Feather King, had a divine soul that was weaker than him. It's useless. There's a saying that goes, when the Tao is 1 foot tall, the devil is 10 feet tall. Even if you can use the power of the origin, you're still not my match. After Night Sorrow used the God World's origin power, the Darkness Origin will immediately became even stronger. It took the initiative again. Not good. Night Sorrow seems to be in trouble. In the vast heaven pagoda, Fire Phoenix King, who was talking to Dragon Sparrow King, immediately realized that something was wrong. But she was in the spatial artifact and could not get out at all. She could only be anxious. Look at Dark Feather King's aura. It became so evil in an instant, as if he became a different person. Dragon Sparrow King, who had been carefully observing, also saw that something was wrong. He immediately communicated with Shao Kong and said, "Vast Heaven Pagoda's artifact spirit, do you have any way to help Lord Night Sorrow? His situation is not too good. I don't have the ability to participate in this battle. However, I can activate the array formation that has been set up." At the same time that Shao Kong responded to Dragon Sparrow King, it directly activated the array formation that Night Sorrow had set up. After the array formation was activated, it immediately began to weaken the Darkness Origin power. Before being suppressed by the array formation, the Darkness Origin power was roughly equivalent to a half-step sovereign strength. After being weakened by the array formation, it was almost reduced to the level of a high-level Divine King. The Darkness Origin power was also weakened a lot because of this. Night Sorrow felt that the pressure on him had decreased a lot. Damn array formation. After being suppressed by the array formation, the Darkness Origin power was immediately enraged. The evil it wanted to destroy the array formation at the first moment. It split off some of its will to control the origin power and launch a barrage of attacks on the array formation. Moreover, it split off a trace of its will to control the origin power and launch an attack on the Vast Heaven Pagoda. Seeing that the Vast Heaven Pagoda was being attacked, the Fire Phoenix King and Dragon Sparrow King's eyes widened. However, just as the Darkness Origin power approached, Tian Yunbao shook again and directly blasted the Darkness Origin power away. But the light of Tian Yunbao, who released another attack, started to weaken at a speed visible to the naked eye. If Lord Night Sorrow can't win quickly, things will be dangerous. The sovereign divine artifact Tian Yunbao seems to have already exhausted all of its energy. Although the Dragon Sparrow King inside the Vast Heaven Pagoda was glad that he was saved by the Vast Heaven Pagoda, he was clearly aware that Tian Yunbao was already close to the state of a lamp running out of oil. He could only place his hopes on Night Sorrow. The Fire Phoenix King beside him was similarly so, extremely anxious. At this time, the Fire Phoenix King, who thought for a moment, suddenly opened her mouth and said, "Dragon Sparrow King, do you think that if the Vast Heaven Pagoda is shattered, can we go out and fight?" The feeling of being completely unable to exert strength made the Fire Phoenix King very conflicted. "What you said seems to make some sense. However, I feel that since Lord Ancestor Phoenix set the rules, there shouldn't be any loopholes left. Not being able to use spatial artifacts is because His Excellency wants to test the challenger and doesn't wish for him to receive any help. If we take advantage of the loophole to attack, it's very likely that we'll touch the rules taboo. The Dragon Sparrow King, who thought for a while, similarly had some thoughts in his heart. He felt that if the darkness source power blasted towards the vast heaven pagoda again, then the vast heaven pagoda would very likely be directly shattered. He and the Fire Phoenix King might be able to extricate themselves and fight side by side with Night Sorrow. But he was somewhat worried that this would anger the Ancestor Phoenix Supreme who set the rules. "Why are you guys like this?" Little Sky, who heard the conversation between the Fire Phoenix King and the Dragon Sparrow King, immediately trembled in fear. If the vast heaven pagoda was shattered, its outcome as an artifact spirit would definitely be extremely tragic. Right at this time, the location where the Dark Feather King and the Darkness Source were, the energy suddenly started to fluctuate violently. Very clearly, this was the Darkness Source will brewing an attack again, preparing to launch an attack towards the vast heaven pagoda again. The Darkness Source was the same as the Dragon Sparrow King and the Fire Phoenix King, similarly seeing that Tianyun Bao's energy was already basically exhausted. It wanted to directly destroy the vast heaven pagoda. Chapter 2794. The two of them discovered that the darkness source power brewed by the darkness source was already half-step sovereign level. If this kind of attack was released, regardless of whether it was Night Sorrow's body, the vast heaven pagoda, or them, they might all be directly insta-killed. The only thing present that could survive was probably only Tianyun Bao, this sovereign divine artifact. Very clearly, the darkness source power's attack just now was just a simple probing. At this very moment, it was preparing to erupt with its strongest attack. The goal was not just to destroy the vast heaven pagoda. Most importantly, it wanted to directly destroy Night Sorrow's body. What to do? What should we do? Even under these circumstances, Night Sorrow was still fighting against the will of darkness. The Fire Phoenix King inside the vast heaven pagoda was anxious like an ant on a hot pan, already panicking to a certain extent. And at this time, the darkness source power was still continuing to condense, becoming stronger and stronger. What can we do? We can only pin our hopes on Lord Night Sorrow. The Dragon Sparrow King, who was at his wits' end inside the vast heaven pagoda, sighed helplessly. The darkness source power in the middle of condensing was raised to the limit at this moment and could not be raised anymore. We'll definitely be obliterated by this attack. Seeing the darkness source power completely condense, the Fire Phoenix King's constricted pupils gradually calmed down. She opened her mouth and said, "Anyway, if we fail, we can still return to the small world. At most, we'll die again. I feel that things are not that simple. Perhaps, being killed this time, we'll perish forever." Dragon Sparrow King's heart, a strong foreboding premonition rose up. At the same time, the darkness source power that finished condensing attacked toward Night Sorrow's body and the vast heaven pagoda mercilessly. The Fire Phoenix King and Dragon Sparrow King immediately fell into despair. The situation was already as critical as a hair's breadth. "It's fine. No need to panic." Just as the Fire Phoenix King and Dragon Sparrow King were already in despair, Night Sorrow suddenly transmitted his voiceover. Dragon Sparrow King immediately asked agitatedly, "Lord Night Sorrow, you've already successfully controlled the other party's mind?" "That's not it. But I didn't use all of my divine soul power. My body won't become a complete target." After replying, Night Sorrow used some of the power of his divine soul that he hadn't used. He held the Tianyun Bao in his hand and used the dragon steps in the profound sky to hide. The darkness origin originally thought that Night Sorrow's body wouldn't be able to move, so its attack was very simple. It was a pure condensation of extremely powerful energy, yet it was easily dodged. Who? Night Sorrow successfully dodged the attack with the clear sky pagoda. The Dragon Sparrow King immediately let out a long sigh of relief. However, the attack of the darkness source power was very powerful, directly piercing through the array formation that Night Sorrow set up, reducing the power of the array formation by quite a bit. The suppression on the darkness origin was also much smaller than before. At this time, the darkness source will gathered all of its will, preparing to launch the final confrontation with Night Sorrow. But what it didn't expect was that Night Sorrow didn't withdraw. The part of his divine soul that he left behind controlled the body and used the Samsara halberd to pierce Dark Feather King's dantian. With his dantian broken, Dark Feather King's body was almost crippled. Even if the darkness source will controlled it, it wouldn't be of much use. Seeing that Night Sorrow had broken Dark Feather King's dantian, the darkness source will immediately withdrew from Dark Feather King's body. It took the opportunity to attach itself to Night Sorrow's body, wanting to seize control of his body. Want to seize my body? You've made the worst choice. Night Sorrow, who had already controlled Dark Feather King's body, saw that the darkness source was about to seize control of his body. He immediately left Dark Feather King's deity Sea and returned to his body to fight it. In the previous confrontation, the darkness source had the upper hand. However, Night Sorrow's body had a large amount of merit power. After being at a disadvantage, Night Sorrow immediately used his merit power to purify the darkness source will. After being purified by the merit power, the darkness source immediately weakened. Seeing that the situation wasn't right, it wanted to leave Night Sorrow's body. But how could Night Sorrow let it leave? He used his merit power to bind it and purify it bit by bit. After the darkness source was completely purified, the darkness source will become a body of energy with no consciousness. The surrounding world began to change from a pitch-black world to a bright one. After using Tianyun Bao to destroy the darkness source Night Sorrow obtained a sparkling black ball. Although this black ball emitted a black aura, it wasn't evil at all. Instead, it contained a trace of dominating aura. After thinking for a while, Night Sorrow threw it into Tianyun Bao to repair Tianyun Bao's injuries. After using Tianyun Bao to absorb the black ball, Tianyun Bao recovered a lot and was in a better state than before the battle. Night Sorrow was very happy about this. He sent a voice transmission to Dragon Sparrow King and Fire Phoenix King, now that the darkness source has been broken. The Divine King of the Dark Territory has probably fallen to the Divine Lord level and is no longer a threat. Tianyun Bao has recovered more than half. We still have 6 territories to explore. As long as we destroy the origins of these 6 territories, the crisis of the Divine World's territory will be resolved. That's right. Dragon Sparrow King replied and asked, then, should we go to other territories or the Divine World's territory to check on the battle situation? Let's go to the Divine World's territory to check on the battle situation first. If the Divine World's territory has the ability to hold on for a period of time, we'll go to other territories and think of ways to destroy their origins. If the Divine World's territory can't be defended, then the matter will be difficult to solve. After thinking for a while, Night Sorrow said and carried the Samsara halberd and Tianyun Bao on his back and flew in the direction of the Divine World's territory. During the flight, Night Sorrow realized that after the surroundings became bright, some of the birds and beasts that had lost their intelligence began to wake up. He was very gratified. However, although they were getting closer and closer to the Divine World's territory, Night Sorrow's mood began to become heavier and heavier. Today, there was only one big city left in the Divine World's territory that was not occupied by the evil creatures of the 7 territories. The reason why it was not occupied by the 7 territories was because this big city and its circumference of 1,000,000 miles was enveloped by an extremely tyrannical array. When Night Sorrow found the vicinity, the evil creatures were using all kinds of methods to break the array. Although the array in front of them was of a high grade, it was not a Dominator-level array. It was only a matter of time before it was broken. Seeing the situation in front of her, Fire Phoenix King said, although the Divine World's territory is in danger, it seems to be very safe for now. We can go to other territories to destroy their origins in peace. No. Things are not that simple. Chapter 2795. Things aren't that simple. Lord Night Sorrow, what do you mean? Dragon Sparrow King, who was in the Clear Sky Pagoda, immediately frowned and asked after hearing Night Sorrow's words. He was the same as Fire Phoenix King, unable to leave the clear sky pagoda. His perception of the outside world was much weaker. Some things could not be seen at all. Is the array protecting the Divine Realm cities about to be broken? Fire Phoenix King asked worriedly. Night Sorrow carefully observed his surroundings. Seeing that there was nothing unusual around him, he transmitted his voice to the two. If I'm not wrong, the people of the 7 territories are setting up the heaven and earth killing array. If they succeed in activating it, the city's defensive array will definitely be broken. The array they set up is borrowing the power of heaven and earth. It's better than the city's defensive array. What? Heaven and earth killing array? Hearing this name, Fire Phoenix King was stunned. Then she said, I heard that setting up this array requires a lot of materials. I wonder how they are going to activate it. They probably don't have enough materials and want to use the origins of the 7 territories to make up for it. Therefore, it can't be considered a real heaven and earth killing array. However, I feel that the power won't be much weaker. Night Sorrow said. He had comprehended the heaven and earth killing array in the heaven and earth array diagram. Compared to the array set up by the 7 territories, it was much better. However, the 7 territories had 7 great origins. Of course, at present, there were already 6 great origins. At this time, the darkness origin had already been absorbed by Tianyun Bao. The strength of the dark territories' divine king and divine lord had already decreased. However, they did not make any noise in their own territories. After all, if the people of the other territories knew that the dark territory had even lost its origins, they might directly devour them. In that case, the dark territory would directly disappear. Now that the darkness origin has been absorbed by Tianyun Bao, can they still successfully activate the heaven and earth killing array? Fire Phoenix King asked doubtfully. After hearing Night Sorrow's words, she also felt that things were a bit difficult. After all, excluding the dark territory, the other 6 territories had at least 15 divine kings. The number of divine kings in the divine realm should not be more than 5. According to my judgment, it can definitely be activated, but it's hard to say how powerful it will be. However, if we can destroy 2 or 3 more origins, their great formation should not be able to be activated. Night Sorrow voiced his opinion. At that moment, he suddenly stopped his voice transmission. This was because he discovered that not far away, there were 2 extremely ugly divine lords in human form. They were slowly flying through the void. Cao Linger, who had just walked out from her cultivation, saw the faces of these 2 divine lords, and was so frightened that she suddenly cried out in the vast heaven pagoda. Regardless of whether it was the Scarlet Territory, the Soul Slaughter Territory, the 10,000 Miasma Territory, the Een Demon Territory, the 1,000 Wasps Territory, or the Poison Heart Territory. Compared to the cultivators of the Celestial Realm, most of the living beings in the Celestial Realm had ferocious appearances. Even if they were to transform into human form, they would still retain some of their original characteristics. Don't brag. Lord Night Sorrow is currently deep in the enemy's territory. If he were to be discovered, it would be a one-on-one fight against 7 territories. He would definitely not be a match for them. As soon as Cao Linger cried out, Long K King made a gesture to her to keep quiet. At that moment, the Divine King-level figures of the 7 territories were all paying attention to the great formation protecting the Celestial Realm cities. No one would have thought that there would be people from the Celestial Realm appearing outside the cities. Therefore, the defenses and alertness of each territory were relatively low. Therefore, Night Sorrow could easily sneak into the hinterland of such a place. If he were to be discovered in the center of such a battle zone, he would definitely be surrounded. Long K King was worried that the sound in the vast heaven pagoda would be transmitted to the outside world. It's okay. If it weren't for Little Kong's special control, the people outside would not be able to hear the sound inside. Night Sorrow and the others walked far away and said. Then, he continued, what we need to do now is to quickly find the origins of 2 or 3 territories and destroy them. It's easier said than done to find the location of the origins. After all, the origins have their own will. Long K King heard Night Sorrow's words and immediately felt a little dejected. He felt that it was too difficult to complete this task. First of all, it was difficult to determine the location of the origins. Secondly, if they were to make a move and cause a big commotion, it would definitely alarm the people of the other territories. In that case, Night Sorrow would definitely face the situation of being surrounded and annihilated. Difficult doesn't mean that there is no way. I can feel that the 7 territories in front of us are using less than 1% of their origins in the formation. It seems that they are testing the power of the Celestial Realm's formation. If the remaining 6 origins are not in the formation's location, we will have a great chance. At first, Night Sorrow thought that the origins of the other 6 territories were already present. However, after carefully observing with the eye of the sea serpent, he realized that he could not be sure whether they were there or not. At that moment, Cao Linger, who was trembling in fear, suddenly sent a voice transmission. "Brother Night Sorrow, the origins you are talking about, are they the ones that we encountered in the battle just now?" "Yes. As long as 2 or 3 of them are destroyed, the threat facing the Celestial Realm will be reduced by a lot." Night Sorrow sent a voice transmission to Cao Linger. Then Linger can go out and help Brother Night Sorrow to sense their location. Cao Linger continued to send a voice transmission. She was very happy when she thought of what she could do for Night Sorrow. Long K King and Fire Phoenix King, who heard this, shook their heads one after another. The 2 of them did not speak. Night Sorrow said with a smile, "Linger, in the current situation, Brother Night Sorrow is unable to release you. Otherwise, your brother K King and sister Fire Phoenix would have come out to fight with Brother Night Sorrow." "Ah. I'm sorry, Brother Night Sorrow." Linger forgot about this. Hearing Night Sorrow's words, Cao Linger immediately blushed. She thought for a while with a red face and said, "Brother Night Sorrow, actually, I don't need to go out. You can also hunt them down." "Oh. What method do you need to use to hunt down the origins of several large territories?" Night Sorrow asked curiously. "I can teach Brother Night Sorrow a secret technique to track aura. The aura in front of you can help Brother Night Sorrow to track down the location of the territory's origins," Cao Linger said. She continued, "However, this is the Horn race's secret technique. After Brother Night Sorrow obtains it, you can't teach it to others. Since it's the Horn race's secret technique, Brother Night Sorrow shouldn't learn it. Just study other methods." Night Sorrow immediately refused when he heard that Cao Linger wanted to teach him the Horn race's secret technique. If he learned the secret method of the Horn clan from a little girl, he would feel bad. "Brother Night Sorrow, our entire Horn race tribe was saved by you. Furthermore, you have karma with our ancestors. Learning the Horn race's secret technique is nothing. You should learn it." Chapter 2796. At this time, Night Sorrow was still in the state of fusion of 2 divine souls. His comprehension was extremely terrifying. Cao Ling had just transmitted the secret technique's incantation to him, and he naturally comprehended it. In an instant, he comprehended the secret technique. Night Sorrow sighed slightly and said, "Since we're here, let's take things as they come. Just take good care of the Horn tribe in the future." However, at the same time, he separated his 2 divine souls and let them return to the first and second divine seas respectively. He was still not used to the feeling of 2 divine souls fusing together. Then, he said to Cao Ling, "Thank you for this matter, but don't do it again." Ling knows. "Brother Night Sorrow, you have to do your best." Cao Ling smiled sweetly. She understood that Night Sorrow had already learned the secret technique. "Okay. Brother Night Sorrow, I won't let Ling down." After replying to Cao Ling, Night Sorrow began to use the secret technique to track down the source of the bloody territory. After following the bloody aura for a while, Night Sorrow gradually left the vicinity of the Divine World cities and entered the real bloody territory. The first source that I'm looking for is not near the Divine World cities. This is a very good opportunity. After confirming that the bloody source was in the depths of the bloody territory, the difficulty of the matter was greatly reduced. Night Sorrow felt very fortunate. It's a good opportunity. However, you still need to be careful. Who knows, you might encounter several divine king. Dragon Sparrow King also felt fortunate, but he did not forget to remind him. If you solve it fast enough, you won't encounter many divine king. Because many divine king are around the divine world's territories. While Night Sorrow was tracking the bloody source, he was very careful in the bloody territory. He encountered some creatures that originally belonged to the divine world. Whether they were human cultivators or other cultivators, they had all been corroded by the bloody color and turned into mindless bloody puppets. These tragic scenes reminded Night Sorrow of the eternal supreme world. If it weren't for the supremes of the eternal supreme realm, he and most of the cultivators of the god realm would have been reduced to such a mindless existence. This must be the sorrowful aura that primordial phoenix ancestor wants me to feel. As Yi Shang continued to move toward the location of the blood origin, he felt something and comprehended many things. Just like that, he took about 3 days to bring everyone in the Great Sky Pagoda to the Bloody Territory's base camp. It was a blood-red palace. The palace towered into the clouds and was completely made of bones. Due to the effects of the spirit design, there was blood flowing on the surface of the bones. It looked extremely evil. Outside the palace, thousands of blood feather gods and high gods were patrolling. These blood-colored creatures were all in human form, but they did not have faces at all. They gave off a very bad feeling. Some of them would turn into a pool of blood after walking for a while, and then stand up again. There are too many patrolling. If we rush in rashly, I'm afraid we'll alert the enemy. Seeing countless blood-colored soldiers patrolling around the palace, Dragon Sparrow King immediately frowned in the Great Sky Pagoda. At this time, Night Sorrow said, "They won't be a threat to me at all. The dangerous thing is the spirit design in the vicinity." As he spoke, Night Sorrow took a step forward and walked toward the blood-colored palace. He walked between the feather gods and high gods. These blood-colored soldiers did not even look at him. This made Dragon Sparrow King very surprised. He asked curiously, "Lord Night Sorrow, how did you do it? Even if there's a concealment spirit design on your body, it shouldn't be impossible for them to discover you at such a close distance. This is called the law of the land. As long as I open my mouth, cultivators who are lower than me will not pose any threat to me." As Night Sorrow explained, he stepped into the blood-colored palace. Because the sea serpents I could see through the surrounding spirit design, he was not discovered by the blood-colored soldiers and did not trigger any spirit design. Amazing. This ability is too exaggerated. Doesn't this mean that if you cultivate to the ruler level, no matter how many divine kings the other rulers send to surround and kill you, it won't be of any use? Hearing Night Sorrow's description, Xiao and Fire Phoenix King were surprised. After all, in the god realm, some rulers were still worried about being targeted by some powerful divine kings. After all, the ruler's origin was a necessity for a divine king to advance to the ruler level. However, if Night Sorrow advanced to the ruler level, he would not have to worry about these problems at all. This was because he did not need to make a move at all. He could just open his mouth and say a few words to kill the other party. Seeing Fire Phoenix King's envious expression, Dragon Sparrow King smiled and said, "The challenger chosen by the ancestor Phoenix is naturally not simple." Fire Phoenix King was still immersed in her reverie and only responded softly. At this time, Night Sorrow's expression gradually became serious. After entering the blood-colored palace, he followed the aura of the blood-colored spirit design and kept searching. Finally, he tracked it to a blood-colored mountain peak. At this time, there were some blood tribe creatures slaughtering some high gods and divine lords of the god realm. In just a few breaths of time, more than 20 high gods of the god realm had their heads chopped off. Only 3 divine lords and 6 or 7 high gods were left. Their faces were all filled with hatred and unwillingness. Blood spurted out from the neck of those who had their heads chopped off, dyeing the rocks on the mountain peak red and emitting a strong smell of blood. However, this smell of blood was quickly absorbed by an invisible force. Only the surface of the rocks was left. The blood that had lost its vitality gradually turned from red to dark red. It's the blood-colored spirit design. It's absorbing the smell of blood. Night Sorrow sized up and confirmed that there were only 4 blood tribe divine lords and a few hundred high gods on the mountain peak. He immediately released his aura and flew toward the mountain peak. Destroying the blood-colored spirit design was the goal of this trip, but it was rare to meet God realm cultivators in the blood-colored territory. He did not hesitate to choose to rescue them at the first opportunity. Divine Lord? Which divine king's divine monarch are you? Why have you barged into this place alone? Run, run quickly. This is the habitat of the blood-colored spirit design. Without the divine king's strength, you won't be able to return. One of the divine lords bound by the blood-colored chains noticed that the saber that was about to cut his neck had been blocked by Yi Shang before he was decapitated. While he rejoiced, he immediately shouted a warning. Since we have met, it's fate. I will do my best to save you. Night Sorrow did not pay attention to the divine lord's warning. After all, his real goal was to destroy the blood-colored spirit design. It was inevitable that he would encounter a divine lord or the divine king. Save what? Run quickly. Leave before the blood-colored spirit design is alerted. The other Sir God, who was bound, roared as his expression changed. Chapter 2797. Kill the intruder. A god lord from the Scarlet Territory immediately issued a kill order after discovering Yi Shang's figure. His name was Xue Sha and he was the leader of these people. At the same time, Xue Sha sent a message to the divine king of the Bloody Territory. From his point of view, informing a godly king was enough to deal with a godly lord like Yi Shang. Run. Xue Sha must have informed the divine king. It won't be long before the divine king of the Bloody Territory arrives. Combined with the blood origin source, you will definitely die. Divine Lord Imozia, who was bound, shouted angrily. In his opinion, Night Sorrow was walking into a trap and would die for no reason. No worries. Even if the divine king arrives, I'll save all of you. Night Sorrow did not arrogantly say it out loud. Instead, he sent a message to everyone in the divine world, hoping that they would feel at ease. However, these people did not believe that he could fight the divine king and the Origin's will. They all advised him to escape immediately. Kill. At the same time, the Sir Gods and many high gods of the Bloody Territory surrounded Night Sorrow. After Xue Sha spoke, a few more Sir Gods appeared at the peak of the mountain. In addition to the previous few, the number of Sir Gods in the Bloody Territory had reached 10. The restrained people of the divine world all sighed. After all, in the eyes of ordinary people, it was almost impossible for one to fight against 10 cultivators of the same level. The 10 Sir Gods of the Bloody Territory looked like they were made of blood. When they attacked Night Sorrow, they all turned into water droplets and hid in the void. The most peculiar thing was that when the 10 of them attacked, they formed a complete group. They turned into giants and attacked Night Sorrow fiercely. They were at the same cultivation level as Night Sorrow, so their words were ineffective. However, Night Sorrow used his words to suppress all the high gods present and combined them to attack the 10 Sir Gods. Forbidden Reincarnation Spear. Night Sorrow took out his reincarnation heavenly halberd and threw out the Forbidden Reincarnation Spear. This move had been improved several times and was close to perfection. As for the Samsara heavenly halberd, it was already at the half-step ruler level. It had a great advantage against divine lords. After the Forbidden Reincarnation Spear was thrown out, it even had the intention of shaking the bloody mountain. The 10 blood monarchs were immediately disintegrated by the bombardment. The attack they had just launched did not even touch the corner of Night Sorrow's clothes. This kind of strength is already on par with the Divine King, right? Seeing Night Sorrow unleash such a powerful attack, God Monarch Imozia of the God Realm immediately praised. He wasn't the only one. The other high gods and monarchs of the god realm were also staring at the scene with wide eyes. He should be as strong as the divine king. A divine monarch against a divine king, this was a genius that had never appeared in the divine realm before. Maybe he has the ability to save us. Zhong Lingxiao, another god monarch, was also encouraged by Night Sorrow's attack. The enemy in front of us is obviously stronger than us. Quick, activate the blood formation. Xue Sha, the leader of the god monarchs, saw Night Sorrow's attack and divine weapon and immediately understood that he was an existence that no god monarch could resist. He ordered his subordinates to activate the blood formation. However, the blood monarchs were all under Night Sorrow's control. They grouped together and attacked another blood monarch. These blood-colored gods were weak individually, but there were too many of them. When they worked together, their attack power was enough to strike fear into the hearts of the blood-colored sovereigns. Bastard! What kind of move is this? Xue Sha, who had given the order, saw that the blood monarchs were out of control and listened to Night Sorrow. He immediately disappeared into the void and chose to activate the blood formation himself. The blood formation? Night Sorrow wanted to stop Xue Sha from activating the formation, but he was besieged by the other god monarchs. In terms of strength, these god monarchs were worlds apart from Night Sorrow, but their moves were very special. Not only could they fuse together, but they could also scatter and seep into the soil. When they suddenly exerted their strength, they had already turned into thousands of god monarchs. What a strange move. While Night Sorrow resisted, he opened the eye of the sea serpent to observe the enemy's position and changes. Because the blood monarchs had special moves, he did not have time to stop Xue Sha from activating his movement technique. Moreover, he had completely risen from the ground into the void. Boom! Boom! Night Sorrow rose into the void and broke the blood monarch's attacks again and again. Suddenly, thunder began to rumble in the void. Be careful of the blood rain. This formation contains the aura of the blood origin. Even the divine king might not be able to last long in this formation. Seeing that Night Sorrow did not stop the formation from activating, Zhong Lingxiao immediately shouted worriedly. Sigh. These god monarchs of the divine world are really scared out of their wits by the people of the blood territory. It wasn't like this when I was training. Seeing Zhong Lingxiao's reaction, Long Ke King, who was in the clear sky pagoda, could not help but let out a sigh. They didn't do anything wrong. The god monarchs of the divine world might not have high standards, so Long Ke King's words were a little angry. However, Night Sorrow did not feel that there was anything wrong with it. At the very least, they knew how to worry about their companions. This proved that their minds had not been corrupted by the blood territory. If he rescued them, he would obtain a lot of useful information. At this moment, the void that was originally filled with thunder and lightning suddenly became quiet. Then, several incomparably beautiful blood clouds floated over. These blood clouds had a very strong evil aura. When it floated above Yichang, a dense rain of blood immediately fell. Many of the god monarchs of the blood territory, including Xue Sha, merged into the blood rain. Following the blood rain, they attacked Night Sorrow. Why do I feel that your blood territory should change its name to Bloodwater Territory? Night Sorrow raised his head and looked up at the void. Until now, he had not used his full strength. Facing the blood rain that poured down, he looked at the people of the divine world who were bound. He judged that if the blood rain poured down like this, the god monarchs and high gods of the divine world would definitely encounter a great disaster. Therefore, Night Sorrow struck the void with raging flames, demon subduing. The flames that suddenly appeared purified the blood water in the sky. Then, he roared out the green rock soul-splitting roar into the void, shaking all the god monarchs of the blood territory out of the void. Although Night Sorrow had not even activated the Treastrimsa battle mystic technique, he had completely taken the initiative. Very good. Although you are a god monarchs, you have the strength of the divine king. The divine king likes to devour cultivators with tricks like you. When Night Sorrow suppressed all the god monarchs of the blood territory, a sudden roar came from the void. Clearly, the divine king of the blood territory had arrived. The divine king has arrived? I wonder how many there are. Fighting against the god monarchs, Knight Sorrow did not even sweat. He easily held the initiative and protected everyone in the divine world. Chapter 2798. Blood Clan's Sky-Swallowing Technique. Knight Sorrow was full of fighting spirit, while the divine king from the bloody territory was obviously more irritable. He had just sized up Knight Sorrow for a while before he used his ultimate technique. He was originally in human form, but after using the Blood Clan's Sky-Swallowing Technique, he immediately turned into a blurry blood-red color. After the blood-red color appeared, it immediately spread above the void and almost covered the entire sky. What kind of trick is this? The spreading blood-red color covered the entire sky. Knight Sorrow was a little surprised. He activated the sea serpent's eye to observe but couldn't see the other party's intention. He also couldn't find a chance to attack. Fighting with a foreign race was different from fighting with enemies from the divine world. While he was observing, he asked, "Dragon Sparrow King, you've fought with the Blood Clan before. Do you know what he's doing?" Dragon Sparrow King, who was in the Clear Sky Pagoda, frowned and said, "I've met a divine king before, but he didn't use this so-called Blood Clan Sky-Swallowing Technique. I can't see through his technique." Fire Phoenix King, what about you? Have you heard of a similar technique? Knight Sorrow continued to ask. The divine king from the bloody territory had used the Blood Clan Sky-Swallowing Technique, and his aura was very majestic. He used the blood-red color to completely cover the sky. However, he didn't release his willpower and didn't attack. This made Lin Feng very surprised. I've never encountered such a technique either. However, you still have to be careful when he uses such a technique. Fire Phoenix King reminded him worriedly. I will. Knight Sorrow nodded and continued to look at the sky. At this moment, the divine king from the bloody territory had completely covered the entire sky. Blood Clan's Sky-Swallowing Technique. At this moment, the divine king of the Blood Clan roared again with his blood-red eyes. After he roared, some of the Blood Clan's divine lords and exalted gods turned into blood water and flew into the sky as if they had evaporated. Sky-Swallowing Technique? Is it to devour one's own kind to increase one's strength? Knight Sorrow was still a little surprised when he saw the situation in front of him. He thought for a while and used the heavenly halberd of Samsara to test the waters. He wanted to see if he could interrupt Blood Eye's heaven-devouring art. However, after Knight Sorrow used the heavenly Samsara halberd to unleash the Inferno demon-slaying technique, it was also swallowed up by the red cloud created by the Blood Eye. After swallowing the raging flames from the Samsara halberd, the density of the blood clouds increased significantly. It seems that this blood cloud has the ability to devour. While Knight Sorrow was judging Shui Yun's ability, he held the Samsara halberd tightly and was ready to attack. Meanwhile, Blood Eye laughed coldly and said, "Stop resisting. You have no chance against this King's Blood Clan Sky-Swallowing Technique. Because as long as it was within the range of the blood cloud, anything would be devoured by this king. Including you." After the Blood Eye King's voice was heard, a cold wind blew in the blood cloud. Everything in the area covered by the blood cloud flew up into the sky. This included the captured Sur gods and high gods in the realm of the gods. Sky-Swallowing Technique? Devour everything in the area covered by the blood cloud? Knight Sorrow muttered to himself and shouted, "I'll satisfy you. I'll give you the best thing and see if you can devour it." As he spoke, he took out the Tianyun bow and turned the power of virtue into an arrow and shot it towards the blood cloud. Sovereign Great Artifact. After Knight Sorrow took the Tianyun bow from his back, it let out a loud roar. It also emitted a blinding yellow light. It lit up the blood-red world. Blood Eye immediately saw that Knight Sorrow had taken the Sovereign Great Artifact. He shouted with envy. He used the Sky-Swallowing Technique to attract the Tianyun bow and tried to devour it. You want to devour the Sovereign Great Artifact? Let's see if you can resist the power of virtue. By the time Night Sorrow responded to the blood eye, the arrow formed by the power of merit had already struck the blood cloud. The moment the power of virtue arrow hit the blood cloud, the golden power of virtue was quickly devoured by the blood cloud. After a short while, the blood cloud that covered the sky spat out the golden power of virtue arrow. Clearly, the blood cloud formed by blood eye could not resist the power of virtue arrow. Power of virtue? How can there be such a thing in this world? Impossible, this is impossible. Blood eye, who had a part of the blood cloud purified by the power of virtue arrow, found it unbelievable. Nothing is impossible. After realizing that the power of virtue arrow was effective against the blood cloud, Night Sorrow used his deity domain to bind Zia and the others so that they would not be sucked away by the blood cloud. At the same time, he shot out another 3 power of virtue arrows. In addition to the previous one, 4 arrows pierced through the thick blood cloud. Soon, the blood cloud was almost completely purified. The entire sky was dominated by gold. Damn it! How can there be such a strange power? The Blood Eye Monarch, who had originally thought that he could defeat Night Sorrow, cursed angrily and immediately summoned, Blood Origin, lend me a hand. Blood Eye King, you can't even deal with a celestial. You are really disappointing. It seems like you are not qualified to be the clan leader of the Blood Tribe. The Blood Will was summoned, but it did not appear. Instead, a gloomy voice came from the void. The blood-colored mountain peak beneath the feet of Yi Shang and the rest trembled slightly. Could the blood mountain under my feet be the blood origin? When he thought of this, Yi Shang immediately leaped into the air. Merit Celestial of the deity world, you have discovered my existence, but it is too late for you to escape. As soon as Night Sorrow raised his voice, the blood mountain under his feet split open into a huge mouth and swallowed Night Sorrow and the people of the deity world. What is going on? Lord Night Sorrow, are you still alive? After Night Sorrow was swallowed by the blood origin, everything around him turned blood red. Dragon Sparrow King, who was in the clear heaven pagoda, asked worriedly. I won't die so easily. Hearing Dragon Sparrow King's voice transmission, Night Sorrow replied snappily. After being swallowed by the blood origin, he was surrounded by a bloody stench. Regardless of whether it was the environment or the smell, it was nauseating. He was very unhappy. If you are not injured, quickly think of a way to get out. Dragon Sparrow King reminded, I have heard that the things that are swallowed by the blood origin will quickly become its replenishment. I am thinking of a way. Suddenly being swallowed, Night Sorrow's first reaction was to think of a way to get out. After replying to Dragon Sparrow King, he held the Samsara halberd in his hand and waved it continuously, trying to dig a way out. However, in the bloody stench, he dug for a long time but could not find any end, let alone escape. Cultivators who have been swallowed by the blood origin will not be able to escape. Give up struggling and prepare to turn into a pool of blood. The Scarlet Origin sent a cold voice transmission when it saw that Yi Shang was constantly digging. This is really strange. Night Sorrow, who had failed to dig continuously, suddenly stopped. Chapter 2799. It was because Tian Yunbao needed to absorb the power of blood to activate it. After thinking for a while, Night Sorrow said to himself, I wonder if Tian Yunbao can absorb blood of this grade. The blood-colored origin had swallowed them into the blood-colored world in front of them. It was not easy to escape. Night Sorrow planned to let Tian Yunbao absorb all the blood around him. Buzz. When Night Sorrow transmitted his thoughts to Tian Yunbao, he poured a large amount of blood and virtuous energy into Tian Yunbao. He was afraid that Tian Yunbao would be demonized by the evil attribute if he absorbed too much evil blood. After absorbing a large amount of blood and virtuous energy, Tian Yunbao shook violently and was directly activated. After being activated, Tian Yunbao immediately followed Night Sorrow's instructions and crazily absorbed the blood around him. It instantly absorbed a large amount of blood like a whale swallowing. Stop first. After absorbing a large amount of blood, Tian Yun Bao's aura became much stronger. At this time, Night Sorrow asked Tian Yun Bao to stop. He checked and found that Tian Yun Bao was not affected by the evil blood, so he ordered him to continue absorbing it. What's going on? After Tian Yun Bao absorbed a large amount of blood, the blood-colored origin immediately roared. It did not expect that the Dominator divine weapon in Night Sorrow's hand could absorb so much blood. What's going on? You can absorb other people's blood, but you can't accept others absorbing your blood? Night Sorrow, who was still trapped, was no longer as depressed as before because he saw a path. After Tian Yun Bao was released again, he immediately absorbed the blood energy around him even more crazily. In the blink of an eye, the blood origin was sucked away and fled. As the blood-colored origin, it could accumulate so much blood and become a blood-colored mountain. It had absorbed a lot of blood from the deity realm cultivators. Now, Tian Yun Bao was even more tyrannical than it. He was swallowing like a whale. This caused the crimson origin to panic. Devour the blood clouds in the sky. While the blood-colored origin fled frantically, Night Sorrow saw that the blood-colored cloud formed by the blood-colored eye was still in the sky. He immediately told Tian Yun Bao to absorb the blood clouds in the sky. After being absorbed by Tian Yun Bao, Shui Yun, who had been waiting for an opportunity to attack, quickly felt despair. Ordinary deity realm cultivators rarely had the means to restrain the Crimson Territory when they fought against them. The current Tian Yun Bao was like a natural nemesis. After a large amount of blood was absorbed by him, the blood eye chose to escape just like the blood origin. Trying to escape. Do you have the chance? Seeing that blood eye wanted to escape, Yi Shan immediately cast a virtuous dragon-locking array at him in his human form. After binding him, he immediately let Tian Yun Bao absorb all the blood energy in his body. Poor Blood Eye, a divine king, was directly absorbed by Tian Yun Bao before he could unleash his power. Tian Yun Bao was simply the nemesis of blood. Isn't this a little too miraculous? Mo Zia, Zhong Lingxiao, and the others, who had been saved by Night Sorrow, couldn't believe their eyes after seeing Tian Yun Bao's power. The Blood Eye, the powerful divine king of the Crimson Territory, was actually sucked to death by a deity weapon. If this matter was told to the deity realm, no one would believe it. In fact, it wasn't just them. Even the Fire Phoenix King and the Dragon Sparrow King in the Clear Sky Pagoda were stunned. Although Tian Yun Bao was a Dominator-grade deity weapon, it was still a little exaggerated to say that he had directly sucked a divine king to death. Sucking a divine king to death is nothing. Next, let's directly destroy the Crimson Origin. Only Night Sorrow was very calm. After saying that, he looked at Mo Zia, Zhong Lingxiao, and the others and said, "You guys wait for me here for a while. I'll be back soon. Don't move, wait for me here. I'll be back soon." After saying that, Night Sorrow set up a simple concealment array and flew into the sky. He, who had learned the Horn Race's tracking technique, could sense the general location of the Crimson Origin and directly chased after it. Mo Zia, Zhong Lingxiao, and the others, who were standing in place, all felt that this was a little surreal. They had never imagined that the Blood Eye Territory's origin would be hunted down. Where are you running to? Die. Night Sorrow, who had activated the Treastrimsa battle mystic technique and used the dragon roaming heaven steps, quickly caught up to the Crimson Origin, which wasn't very fast. He sent out Tian Yun Bao again and let him absorb the Crimson Origin's energy. The Crimson Origin, which was entangled by Tian Yun Bao, had thousands of methods, but it couldn't use any of them. It didn't even have the mood to summon the Crimson Territory's divine king. This was because Tian Yun Bao's characteristics restrained the entire Crimson Territory. Tian Yun Bao is indeed worthy of being a sovereign divine weapon. Seeing that the Crimson Origin didn't have the ability to resist at all, the Dragon Sparrow King in the Clear Sky Pagoda was secretly pleased and said, "I was a little worried at first, but now it seems that the Crimson Territory is the easiest to deal with. We're lucky this time. It just so happens that Tian Yun Bao restrains them. Otherwise, the Crimson Origin wouldn't be easy to deal with." Night Sorrow wasn't overly excited. While Tian Yunbao was suppressing the Crimson Origin, he had been vigilant of his surroundings, on guard against a sneak attack from an opponent at the level of the Divine King. However, the Crimson Origins was clear that the Crimson Territory's Divine King was naturally restrained. Even if all of them came, it would be useless. While its energy was being crazily absorbed, it used a secret technique to disintegrate itself into countless blood droplets and spread some information about Night Sorrow and Tian Yunbao. Very soon, the Crimson Origin was completely eliminated by Tian Yunbao, and the various Divine Kings and Divine Lords of the Crimson Territory were immediately weakened. They no longer posed any threat to the Divine World. However, after the Crimson Origin's propaganda, the matter of Night Sorrow outside the Divine World was completely exposed. Moreover, the matter of the Dark Territory's origin being destroyed was also found out by the other territories. After investigating these matters, the people of the 5 territories mercilessly separated the Crimson Territory and the Dark Territory. The opponents of the Divine World territories also changed from 7 to 5 territories. As for the 5 great territories, excluding the 5 great essences, there were roughly 15 God Kings. If the Divine World included Night Sorrow, it would only be in the single digits. In terms of combat strength, the Divine King was still at a disadvantage. However, with the addition of Night Sorrow, the cultivators below the Divine King of the 5 territories no longer had any influence on the Divine World. Moreover, they were likely to be of help in the battle. After thinking about Night Sorrow, he felt that at this time, he had been completely exposed. He might as well bring Mozia, Zhong Lingxiao, and the others to the Divine World territories and fight the 5 territories together with the cultivators of the Divine World. However, after the Crimson Origin exposed him and Tian Yunbao, the top combat strength of the 5 territories all rushed to the Crimson Territory. Chapter 2800. After Zhong Lingxiao finished speaking, the atmosphere in the Heaven and Earth Spirit Gathering Array was heavy and sorrowful. Night Sorrow said, "If everyone believes me, then fight with all your might. You will die today, but as long as the array is not destroyed, you will be reborn one day. Not a single one will be left behind." Ah. We can be reborn after dying in this array? Really? Hearing Yishang's words, Mozia looked at him suspiciously, wanting to confirm the truth of the matter. Of course it's real. I have a friend who was reborn endlessly in the Heaven and Earth Spirit Gathering Array. However, the feeling of death is real every time. Night Sorrow explained to Mozia, then looked at the crowd and said, "From the looks of it, if we fight, I won't be able to handle all of you. Sorry. You've already done enough for us. Don't put too much on us." Zhong Lingxiao had a carefree smile on his face as he spoke to Yishang. Then, he turned to the crowd and said, "Let's go. Follow me, don't be a burden." He meant to leave Night Sorrow as soon as possible. If a great battle broke out and they were a burden, it would be extremely disadvantageous for Night Sorrow. "Everyone, take care." Night Sorrow waved at Zhong Lingxiao and the others as they left. "They're here. The armies of the 5 territories are all here." After sending Zhong Lingxiao and the others away, Night Sorrow stood alone in the array and saw smoke rising from 5 directions. The troops of the myriad miasma, soul-slaying, poison heart, 1,000 wasps, and heavenly diabolism territories were rushing over from 5 different directions. In each team, there were at least 2 God Kings' existences. The myriad miasma territory was formed by a strange miasma between heaven and earth. The 2 divine kings, 10,000 wrath and 10,000 resentment, were in human form, but they were fundamentally different from the cultivators of the God realm. The leaders of the soul-slaying territory, Soul 1, Soul 3, and Soul 15, were all evil mutated beasts in human form. As for the people in poison heart territory, they cultivated from the myriad poison soul. The 1,000 wasps territory and the heavenly diabolism territory were made up of 1,000 demon wasps and demons respectively. Standing in the Heaven and Earth Spirit Gathering Array, Night Sorrow, who was holding the Tianyun bow, looked in 5 directions with the eye of the Mirage Dragon. Then, he took a deep breath and prepared for battle. We're here. Who's going to make a move first? The divine king of the myriad miasma domain, who had arrived in front of the heaven and earth assembly formation, was the first to speak. He could see that Night Sorrow was the only one in the formation. The Tianyun Bao in Night Sorrow's hands made him extremely jealous. When he heard Wan Ru's words, the leader of the soul-slaughtering estate, Han Yi, immediately replied coldly, "Of course we will attack together." As for the ruler artifact, it will belong to whoever manages to snatch it. Everyone, what do you think? Good. Just like that. Let's kill the deity realm cultivators inside first, then we'll figure out who the sovereign god artifact belongs to. The Een Demon King, who was the strongest among them, glanced at the divine king and said coldly, "Very good. Since everyone thinks this is a good idea, then let's attack. If I'm not wrong, the deity realm cultivator is just a Sir God." As the leader of the Thousand Peaks territory, the Thousand Demon Wasp King, spoke, he ordered all the 1,000 demon wasps under him to attack the barrier of the formation. However, when the 1,000 demon wasps pounced on the heaven and earth spirit gathering array, they realized that they could not touch the barrier of the formation at all. All the 1,000 demon wasps that had pounced on them flew into the formation. Seeing the situation in front of him, the 1,000 demon wasp king said coldly, "Kill." What he meant was to let the 1,000 demon wasps under him test the limits of Night Sorrow's strength. It could be considered a suicide attack. If the divine king comes in, he won't be able to do anything at all. Night Sorrow, who was floating quietly in the air, was surrounded by the brilliance of the power of virtue. When the 1,000 demon wasps had attacked, he had waved his sleeves and killed all of them. However, although this wave of his sleeves looked domineering, it was actually him using the law of speech to kill these 1,000 demon wasps with his mouth. However, in the eyes of the divine king, Night Sorrow had killed these 1,000 demon wasps with a wave of his sleeves. He was very powerful. You have some strength. You are worthy of this queen personally taking action. Seeing that Night Sorrow had killed the 1,000 demon wasps, the 1,000 demon wasp queen beside the 1,000 demon wasp king immediately rushed into the formation. "Wasp queen, how can my 1,000 resentment not be involved in snatching the sovereign divine weapon?" After the 1,000 demon wasp queen flew into the heaven and earth spirit gathering array, the 1,000 resentment of the 1,000 miasma territory immediately followed. Obviously, none of the territories could stand by and watch people from other territories snatch the sovereign divine weapon. After the two of them flew into the heaven and earth spirit gathering array, the other 3 territories each sent a divine king. In the eyes of the leaders, 5 divine kings against 1 divine lord, Night Sorrow, was already an extremely luxurious lineup. There was no need for more divine kings to take action. 5 divine kings. Very good. I, Night Sorrow, will fight you 5 divine kings today. Seeing that each of the 5 territories had sent a divine king into the heaven and earth spirit gathering array, Night Sorrow roared and directly activated the 33 Skies Battle Mystic technique to increase his strength. Then, he directly used the Green Rock soul-rending roar to attack the 5 divine kings. Haha. Not a bad divine soul attack, but to this king, it is just child's play. The divine king of the Poison Heart territory, Poison Frost, was not affected by the Green Rock soul-rending roar at all. He directly spat out a strong poisonous gas at Night Sorrow. This poisonous gas was dark green. Wherever it passed, even the mountains were corroded, let alone the flowers and trees. The poison is indeed very strong. But in the heaven and earth spirit gathering array, your attack is useless. In the face of Poison Frost's dark green poisonous gas, Night Sorrow immediately activated the great spirit gathering formation of heaven and earth. In an instant, the poisonous gas was absorbed by the heaven and earth spirit gathering array, leaving no trace behind. You have some ability, but it's not enough. Die. At this moment, the 1,000 demon queen bee, who was slightly affected by the Green Rock's soul-rending roar, aggressively attacked Night Sorrow. At this moment, she was in human form, holding a slender needle-shaped divine weapon. Forbidden Spear. Facing the attack of the Thousand Demon Queen Bee, Knight Sorrow used the Samsara halberd to launch the Forbidden Spear. At the same time, he used the virtuous dragon-locking array. The Thousand Demon Queen Bee, who was temporarily restrained by the virtuous dragon-locking array, was trapped in a sealed space together with the needle-shaped divine weapon in her hand. The halberd radiance from the Samsara halberd suddenly blasted into the space. This attack caused the Thousand Demon Queen Bee to be severely injured. The Thousand Demon Queen Bee was only a lower divine king. Not only was she considered weak among the divine kings of the 5 territories, but she was also a divine king. Although Knight Sorrow's cultivation was only a middle divine lord, his true strength was much stronger than hers. After being hit by the Samsara halberd, the Thousand Demon Queen Bee immediately spat out green blood. This divine lord definitely has the strength of a divine king. All of you, attack together. After killing her, we will discuss how to divide the divine weapons. Chapter 2801. Good. I agree with the Een Demon King. In order to avoid trouble, all of you attack together and kill him quickly. After the strongest Een Demon King spoke, the Thousand Demonic Bee King gave the order coldly. The Thousand Demonic Bee King was furious that Knight Sorrow was stronger than the Thousand Demonic Bee King and had even injured it. Good. I also agree. All of you attack together. We don't have to care about our reputation when fighting against a deity realm cultivator. The leader of the Myriad Miasma territory, Wan Raging, also agreed. After the leaders gave their orders, the 5 divine king immediately surrounded Knight Sorrow. At the same time, the Thousand Demonic Bee King, who was furious that Knight Sorrow had attacked the Thousand Demonic Bee King, sent out 10 divine monarch level Thousand Demonic Bees and countless deity level Thousand Demonic Bees to help. The Thousand Demonic Bees were not strong individually, but they were very good at fighting in groups. When the Thousand Demonic Bee army came out, the sky buzzed. TSK TSK. Thousand Demonic Bee King, we send out 5 divine king, which is enough to crush him. Under such circumstances, you still send out half of your army. Aren't you afraid of losses? Seeing the Thousand Demonic Bee King send out a huge army of Thousand Demonic Bees, the Een Demon King said maliciously. In her opinion, the Thousand Demonic Bee King sent the army in advance to help snatch the sovereign divine weapon Tianyun Bao. Hearing this, the Thousand Demonic Bee King said coldly, he dared to injure the queen bee of this king, so he will have to suffer the cruelest punishment. This king sent out the Thousand Demonic Bee army to eat his flesh and bones. He will not participate in the snatching of the sovereign divine weapon. Good. I hope you will do as you say. After the Thousand Demonic Bee King finished explaining, the Een Demon King snorted and did not speak again. She fixed her gaze on Knight Sorrow. At this moment, Knight Sorrow was under a lot of pressure facing the 5 divine king. He wanted to activate the heaven and earth energy gathering array and use Tianyun Bao. However, at this moment, the Thousand Demonic Bee King sent out the Thousand Demonic Bee army. Seeing this, a smile appeared on Knight Sorrow's face. Without the slightest hesitation, he used the absolute law on the 1,000 demon bees in the 1,000 demon bee army that were below the divine monarch realm. Let them all self-destruct. Although these self-destructing 1,000 demon bees were all at the high deity level, there were too many of them. The sudden explosion had caught everyone, except for Knight Sorrow, off guard. A loud explosion was heard at the same time. The 1,000 demon queen bee, which was the closest to the explosion, was instantly killed. Wan Yuan and the other 4 divine king were also injured to varying degrees. As for the Sir Gods and the 1,000 demon bee army, they didn't even have the chance to make a sound before they were killed by the explosion. Amazing! How did Lord Knight Sorrow manage to kill a divine king and heavily injure 4 others in one go? Hearing Knight Sorrow's words, Mozia, who was hidden in the depths of the heaven and earth spirit gathering array, sighed when he saw Knight Sorrow quietly floating in the air. This tremendous power was simply earth-shattering, and it brought him a great shock. This might be what he meant when he said that his words were law. Those of a lower realm than him won't be able to resist at all. Zhong Lingxiao deduced. During their conversation, Night Sorrow had mentioned some details to them. He had mentioned that he would use his words to destroy all the armies below the Sir God level in the 5 territories. It sounded unbelievable, but it was indeed happening. Bastard. You're courting death for killing my queen bee. The 1,000-demon queen bee had been killed and half of her subordinates had been killed. The 1,000-demon queen bee was enraged. She turned into a huge bee and flew into the heaven and earth spirit gathering array, wanting to kill Night Sorrow directly. The demon king and the others saw the 1,000-demon queen bee fly in directly. They were afraid that Tianyun Bao would snatch it away, so they immediately rushed into the heaven and earth spirit gathering array with him. At this moment, they were very afraid of Night Sorrow's methods. They ordered everyone below the Divine King to stay away from the area covered by the array. In their opinion, Night Sorrow was using the array to make the 1,000-demon bee army self-destruct. You want to attack as a group? You'd better experience what it means to be shocked first. At this moment, Night Sorrow saw the 1,000-demon queen bee and the other Divine King rushing over and used his words again. He detonated all the armies below the Sir God level in the 5 territories, killing almost all the Sir Gods present. Even 2 of the Divine King would die. Damn it, what kind of method is this? The Divine King who had been rushing toward Night Sorrow and wanted to snatch the Tianyun Bao. After all the high gods in the 5 territories self-destructed, they were dumbfounded. Thousands of people had surrounded Night Sorrow, but now it was a dozen against 1. The change in quantity was simply too great. We have to snatch the ruler divine weapon. Otherwise, our demon race will definitely decline. We won't even be able to protect the heavenly diabolism territory. The demon king, who was strong in the 5 territories, didn't have a trace of pity when she saw her subordinates dying. She was still thinking about how to snatch the ruler divine weapon from Tianyun Bao. She was very cold. The leaders of the other 4 territories, other than the furious 1,000-demon queen bee, were also very calm. It was as if losing the army behind them was nothing to them. This is a miracle. Our God Realm territory is saved. Zhong Lingxiao saw everything that was happening and immediately transmitted her voice to Mo Zia excitedly. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We have to do something. Do something? With our strength, I'm afraid we can't help much. Mo Zia sighed slightly. Although there were only a dozen Divine King left in the 5 territories, their combat strength was quite terrifying. To Mo Zia, Zhong Lingxiao, and the others, they were existences that could completely crush them. Our strength is definitely not enough to fight the Divine King. But we can send a message to the God Realm territory. Let a few experts come to support us. Zhong Lingxiao said excitedly. He asked, do you think I'll get such a good opportunity in the God Realm? That makes sense. What you said makes sense. We have to do this. Hearing Zhong Lingxiao's words, Mo Zia's eyes lit up. After analyzing the situation, he opened his mouth and said, the experts of these territories are basically all besieging Lord Night Sorrow. We can hurry back to the God World territory and ask for help. But I think there are too many people. It's most suitable for the 2 of us to go. Good. That's the way it should be. Zhong Lingxiao nodded and continued. Let's not delay. Let's go. Then, he transmitted his voice to Night Sorrow. Lord Night Sorrow, your methods are amazing. I, Zhong Lingxiao, am impressed that you defeated so many experts of the other races. Don't worry, you're not fighting alone here. Zia and I will go and ask for help. Will the experts of the God Realm come to support us? You're tuning into the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.